Okay, we are back with our music. If that can fade out, thank you. So we are back on Article 11 as amended. Thank you for your courtesy on the technological change update. At this time, we're back in Article 11, and I recognize Mr. Pierce.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we amend Article 11. I don't know if it's on the computer or not, but I'll bring you over the data. It came from the DRA, a legal requirement from the state, so to speak. So we'll put up on the display.
Hold on, Mr. Pierce. Can we tune out the music, please? Thank you. Mr. Pierce.
Okay, the change will be if it basically starts at if Article 16 on this warrant article passes so as to approve the cost items in a two-year collective bargaining agreement between the Hampton Board of Selectmen and the Hampton Fire Department's Supervisory Association Local 3017, parentheses, fire officers, and parentheses, then the foregoing operating budget and default budget amount shall be reduced by the amount of $1,899. And if this Article 11 passes, then Article 26 as to mosquito control and 27 as to the police department amount of control on this warrant article should be null and void.
Is there a second to Mr. Pierce's motion, amendment? Seconded by Mr. Zanoy. Mr. Pierce, can you speak to your amendment?
Point of order, Mr.
No, I've got an amendment, please. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Moderator, we always try to send the warrant articles to the Department of Revenue to make sure that they are correct from their point of view. And in this case, we have changed our budget article, which is 11. As you probably all know, here we have an article for mosquitoes and horses on there that are really there in case the budget fails to pass. They're sort of like insurance policies, and apparently the DRA wants us to include that verbiage in Article 11. Thank you.
Thank you. As I understand the process, DRA was given the Hampton warrant to review, and one of its responses was that there was certain language that was mandatory that had to be added to certain warrant articles in order for the warrant article appropriation to be legal. And this is one of those mandatory language changes that the Department of Revenue Administration has given to the town. Is that correct?
That's what I understand. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Okay. My further understanding is that there's an interplay because of the way the default budget works and the way that the current budget works and the fact that there are some subsequent articles, and it's technical, but my understanding is that this language is the creation of the suggestion of the Department of Revenue Administration. Is there any further discussion on Mr. Pierce's amendment? Ms. Woolsey. I've got Ms. Woolsey, and I appreciate the courtesy. I'll get to you, Ms. Latimer, but Ms. Woolsey has the floor.
Well, I believe
Ms. Woolsey has the floor, ma'am.
the Board of Selectmen knew that they were going to have the collective bargaining articles on the warrant. It appears to me that instead of inserting last-minute language, all this could have been taken care of before the warrant was printed. Is there any reason at all? Is this a last-minute ruling by Revenue Admin? Why are we having this last-minute, and I have never, frankly, seen this. By the way, I believe in SB 2 towns, it is illegal to make any changes in the default budget. Why are we seeing this now? I have never seen this before, and we've had collective bargaining articles on, I think, in '08 and '09.
My understanding, Ms. Woolsey, and this amendment is not a change to the default budget, but if you go to a further article in the warrant, there's a negative because of some savings in health insurance in one of the articles. The DRA, you'll see when we get to that article, objects to that negative. And so in trying to deal with that, I understand that they have put some language in here. And the other component, as far as I understand it, is that there are certain things that are in the default budget but are not in this year's budget. So depending on whether the default or this year's proposed budget passes, impacts some separate warrant articles for mosquitoes. So I believe mosquitoes are in the default budget, if you will, but they are not in the current budget, but they are in a separate petition warrant article.
Mosquitoes
or excuse me,
Selectman sponsored.
it's selectman sponsored. So it's that interplay that DRA said, we've got to deal with this negative number. We've also got to deal with the potential redundancy in raising and appropriating monies for the same purpose, mosquitoes, for example, depending on which budget passes, the default budget or the proposed budget. And I would agree with you that this certainly is not a favorable way to do it. And I also concur with you that under the RSA, we've been told, here's your precise language for budgets. But as I said at the beginning, the town submitted its warrant to DRA for review in advance of this meeting. This language came back as being mandatory if we are to cover all the considerations.
Mosquitoes are factored into every year's budget. The Budget Committee put extra money into the proposed operating budget this year. So I certainly would question that. And I also would wonder, the warrant was posted on Friday, January 27th. How recent is this ruling? I mean, everybody had to know the language was pretty well set. We've had draft articles as members of the public and the Budget Committee. How recently was this
Fred,
advice given?
To her question, when did, this was actually required, not suggested by DRA, so make that
When?
clear. When do we act?
They informed us of that the week following the posting of the warrant.
The week following the posting of the warrant?
That's great. Monday or Tuesday of that following week, they informed us that
You
this had to
posted the
go on.
warrant on the 27th
Friday.
of January?
We posted on Friday.
Yes.
They informed us the following Monday or Tuesday, I can't remember which day it was, one of those 2 days, that we had to amend this article in this fashion. And there are a couple of other articles they've insisted we amend or they will not be legal.
So you were printing up Monday afternoon, January 30th, the corrected warrant, because there was a defective warrant printed on January 27th and posted that lacked 3 zoning articles, for which Mr. Moody has not been thanked. So after the printing, because I got a printout from you at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so it was after that the DRA told you that this language needed to be added.
That is correct. And we could not add it at that point because the warrant had been filed. It's a substantial language to amend.
I do have to say, A, that I object strenuously to individuals doing their utmost to secure default budgets in this community, and I also object to continuing larding on of language, and DRA can be blamed in this instance, that totally and completely confuses the public. I think this is disgraceful.
Anyone else wishing to be heard on the Pierce Amendment? Ms. Latimer.
Actually, on the Pierce Amendment, Deandra Sanfie spoke before you as to the money and requested reservation for an amendment.
Yeah,
And
we don't
now
take
we've jumped-
reservations here, Ms.
Well, we've
Latimer.
jumped ahead to the end.
We're
so-
trying to get language up for the will of the body that the DRA has said is necessary to make this article effective. And this body has the ability to approve it or not. But that's what we're on right now. And Ms. Sanfie is the next speaker in line, but we're going to take this Pierce Amendment, and then I'm going to go to Ms. Sanfie.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Anything further on the Pierce Amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the Pierce Amendment, which would be to add that language that is highlighted on the screen, raise your voter card, please. Down cards. Any opposed? I declare the Pierce amendment has carried. Ms. Sanford? You have to make that, and then I'll take it after you make it if there's a second.
Diandra Sanfee, 34 Langdale Drive. I would like to make an amendment to the article by $14,650 decrease to the budget final of $25,535,290 to the current.
Is there a second to Ms. Sanfee's proposed amendment? Seeing none, the amendment. Okay,
I'm just not sure of the numbers.
all right. Well,
Can we run those numbers?
yeah, I think the gist of it is a 14,000
$650
decrease. Okay, so we'll make sure we'll get, all right. So we have a motion, an amendment by Ms. Sanfee, seconded by Mr. McFarland. So she proposes to amend Article 11 by decreasing the amount $14,650 so that the new budget number would be $25,510,640.
Correct.
Excuse me, 24 million. So 24,510,640. Is that the intent of your motion, Ms. Sanfee?
Yes.
Would you speak to your amendment, please?
Yes. I'm speaking to this on page 3 of the budget, of the operating budget, and it is account number 4150, 7120, and 4150, 7610 for the part-time wages of a part-time human resource personnel and for supplies and expenses. The total comes to the $14,650, and the reason I propose this is that I believe that this is redundant and unnecessary. We have department heads which are all trained in how to go about their departments. We also have a town manager. We have 2 town attorneys, and we also have people who, in their departments, as I said, are trained. This is part of the department head's position to know how to hire and fire and do specific things that a human resource director is not necessary. I feel that this is just another piece of bureaucracy that's being added on to an already hot level that we keep continuing on, and I don't think it's necessary. I think it's overkill, and I just would like to see us use the department heads as we have them, use our town attorney as we have him, and if necessary, the town attorneys who are also there, that if anyone needs to go to them, as it has been now put back into the budget, that they can use them for any questions they have in relation to human resources. So I would ask your support on this, and I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanfee. Before I get to Mr. McFarland and Ms. Latimer, my intention is, as we are at the lunch hour, is to take a final vote on this budget before we break for lunch. So, do either Mr. McFarland or Ms. Latimer wish to speak to the Sanfee amendment? Okay. Please do so, and then we're going to take a vote on the amendment, and then immediately thereafter on the final budget number.
Mark McFarland, 3 Warner Lane, also a member of the Budget Committee. Just a little history on this amount of money. It was an additional line to last year's budget that was presented to the Budget Committee. We removed it originally, and then during budget review last month, when it became clear that there may not be money in the budget for 2 in-house attorneys, this human resource position became an important position. So to kind of reiterate what Ms. Sanfee said, if in fact that money has been restored, and we're looking at in-house attorneys, this is an utter redundancy. So I was the person who made the motion to put that $14,650 back into the budget last month. I would urge you to vote on the amendment or the amended bottom line and reduce that by the $14,640. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McFarland. Ms. Latimer, and then we're going to address the amendment and the final budget number.
Just echoing quickly, this is duplicity. It was voted back in, or voted into the budget when the $146,000 was taken out of the legal line. Again, all of this money would go into the administrative department, and since we have now added over $146,000 back into it, there is no need for this additional $14,000. Thank you.
Okay. Now, Mr. Nichols, I'm going to go out for the vote. It was brought to my attention that the number, when we do the math with Ms. Sanfe's amendment, that the number should be 24,520,640. So if that is agreeable to the person who made the amendment, that we correct that 24,520,640. And I can't remember who I got that second from. Who was the, okay? Mark seconded. So if those folks are agreeable, all those in favor of the Sanfee amendment will raise their voter card, and that is to reduce the budget amount to $24,520,640. All those in favor, raise your voter card, please. Down cards. All opposed? I declare that the Sanfee amendment has passed, and now I'll entertain a motion to close discussion on Article 11. All those, so by doing so, our final budget figure will be $24,520,640. All those in favor of closing discussion on Article 11, raise your voter card. Down card. All opposed? Article 11 is closed. I'd entertain any motion to restrict reconsideration on Article 11. All those in favor?
Article 10 and 11, Mr. Moderator.
I'll take it on Article 10 and 11. All those in favor of restricting reconsideration, Article 10 and 11. Down cards. All opposed. Articles 10 and 11 are restricted from further discussion and consideration of this meeting. We will take a 35-minute break, so we'll be back here just after 1 o'clock. There's food, as we mentioned earlier. Help support the 8th graders at Hampton Academy who are traveling to New York City in the first week of June. And we'll be back a few minutes after 1 o'clock to conclude our session. Thank you. We will resume the deliberative session with Article 12. So if everyone who wishes to participate could come back into the auditorium, and if we could get all the folks that we need at the table, we will begin with Article 12. Shall the town of Hampton vote to approve the cost items included in a 2-year collective bargaining agreement reached between the Hampton Board of Selectmen and the Teamsters Local 633, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing level: 2012, $17,638, 2013, $40,237, and further to raise and appropriate the sum of $17,638 to fund the cost items relating to the Teamsters Local 633 salaries and benefits for 2012. Such sum represents the additional salaries and benefits over the 2011 budget level for the first 2 years that are contained in the collective bargaining agreement between the town of Hampton by its Board of Selectmen and the Teamsters Local 633 clerical, public works foremen, police department dispatchers pursuant to NHRSA 273A, majority vote required, recommended by the Board of Selectmen, recommended by the Board of Selectmen 5-0, recommended by the Budget Committee 13-1. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 12? Moved by Mr. Nichols, seconded by Mr. Lally. Mr. Nichols, would you like to speak to Article 12?
Yes, I would. This is a 2-year contract being proposed, running from April 1st, 2012 to March 31st, 2014. It reinstitutes the step scales with increases of 1.5% in the first year and 1% in the second year of the agreement. It continues the Matthew Thornton HMO health plan that was part of an agreement approved by the voters last year with the Teamsters, with employees continuing to pay 10%. The HMO was and is an 18% savings for both employees and the town. If approved, new hires after April 1st, 2012 will be paying 25% of health insurance premiums. I feel this agreement with the Teamsters is very fair to the taxpayer and would urge the voters to approve it.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Mr. Noyes, would you like to be heard on Article 12?
Keith Noyes, Public Works Director. On behalf of my managers who are members of the Teamsters Association, I would like to ask for your support of this warrant article and collective bargaining agreement. I am proud to have these managers part of my management team. They are reliable, hardworking, creative, and loyal to the town. I believe the town is fortunate to have them overseeing the many services the Public Works Department provides. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Noyes. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 12? Seeing none, Article 12, Mr. Pierce?
A couple words, if I may. Everybody in town knows that the contracts in the town have gone quite some time, and it's time to have contracts. But putting that aside as an issue all by itself, these contracts this year really were well negotiated. I think that we can honestly say on both sides of the issue, regardless how you look at it, that everybody put a big effort in, and I think this is a very positive step in these particular agreements. So I would like to see your support on all the bargaining agreements. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Yes, sir. Mr. Edgar.
My name is Mike Edgar, 7 Ann's Terrace. I want to say something about this and all the other contracts. I think it should be being pushed harder by everybody. I think it's very important. It's the #1 issue I think that's facing the town this year. It's been too many years that a lot of the groups haven't had a contract. I think we ought to get behind them.
Thank you, Mr. Edgar. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Seeing none, Article 12 will appear on the ballot as printed. Article 13, shall the town of Hampton vote to approve the cost items included in a 2-year collective bargaining agreement between the Hampton Board of Selectmen and the Hampton Police Association officers, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing level. 2012, $133,420. 2013, $191,105. And further to raise and appropriate the sum of $133,420, representing the additional costs attributed to the increase in salaries and benefits required by the new agreement to fund the additional cost items, Hampton Police Association officers' salaries and benefits for 2012. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, 5-0. Recommended by the Budget Committee, 14-0. Note the above stated amounts are calculated as follows. 2012, $133,420, which is derived from the difference between an increase in salaries and benefits of $173,196, offset by $39,776 in health insurance savings. 2013, $191,105, which is derived from the difference between an increase in salaries and benefits of $247,101, offset by $55,996 in health insurance savings. I'll take a motion to open discussion on Article 13, moved by Mr. Nichols, second by Mr. Lally. Mr. Nichols, would you like to speak to Article 13?
Yes, I would. This is also a proposal for a 2-year contract running from April 1st, 2012 to March 31st, 2014. This would replace a contract approved in 2003 that terminated in 2006. The start step is increased to $20 from $17.33, essentially starting pay, and the 1-year step is eliminated. Employees are placed on the proper step or will receive a 3% increase if there is no step movement. There are no across-the-board increases in the steps in the first year. Steps would increase by 1% in the second year, effective April 1st, 2013. There are no retroactive payments. This would change the standard insurance to the Matthew Thornton HMO, the same one I referenced. The Teamsters have been on for 10 months at this point, with employees paying 10%. Employees may continue on a health plan very similar to the current one, but would pay 15% as opposed to the 10% they would pay if they moved to the HMO. We've increased private detail wages to a level that places Hampton in the middle based on a comparison with other towns. Maximum vacation time for new hires is reduced to 4 weeks. The part-time specials starting pay is increased from $13.16 to $16. I would urge voters to approve the police patrolman's CBA. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Chief Sullivan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I rise to ask for your support in both Articles 13 and 14 as the police chief. I can tell you that the men and women of the department have worked very hard over these last 6 years without a contract, have negotiated with the board, and as you see by the recommendations in front of you, these are being recommended unanimously by both the Board of Selectmen and the Budget Committee, which has not been the case for so many articles. I think that tells us that there is a will on all parts to move forward and support these. I would ask you to do that and support the police department in these 2 articles, as well as all of our employees in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Sullivan. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Mr. Lally?
I talked to the union president last night, Joe Jones. He was not able to be here today, but just wanted to reiterate a few of his thoughts, which I agree with. There is no retroactive pay with this contract, which is a huge savings to the citizens. In years past, in fact, every contract that I can remember, there was retro pay. That can be several $1,000s. In negotiations, that was negotiated out. The police have given up a substantial part of their health care as far as payment. They're going to pay more in. Major savings to the town in the health care portion of this contract. It brings everybody up to their proper steps, which is important. It's an important morale thing for the men and women, and it's just important for the structure of the department. It brings the lower seniority officers and the part-time officers up. And what this does is it creates an atmosphere where people want to work for the Hampton Police Department. It saves people from leave. We've had officers leave the past 3 or 4 years because the salaries weren't competitive. And I can never remember that happening in my history with the town, being here 35 years. But I think this will also help attract future officers because of its competitiveness in other cities and towns in the state of New Hampshire. So I'm very happy. I'd like to thank personally Mr. Nichols, who it's never an easy thing to negotiate any union contracts. It can be contentious. As you know, this has been going on for 6 years. It's a difficult thing. You're not the most popular guy in the room. But I think the union representatives were in the room. We're all very professional, and I'd like to thank them also. Police, fire, public works, Teamsters, they were professional people in the room, and that's how we got this done. So I'd like to thank everybody, and I've been trying for my past 6 years on the board. It'd be nice to get these done. We have goals every year when we come in March after the elections. We set goals. Mine was always to get these contracts done. I always mentioned those in the goals, as did most of the other selectmen. So now that I'm leaving, it's great to see that they're on the ballot. We've got to get one more on here next year. It wasn't on this year, but we got 5 out of the 6. And I urge everybody to please, let's vote these in and move on to a new chapter with the collective bargaining in the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lally. Mr. Griffin?
Yes, I also am very in favor of all of these union contracts. I think that, in my opinion, the other years that I've been here and we've been trying to get these passed, the big thing that was different this year was the lawyer that we had. And I'd like to thank him, Matt Upton. And I do think it's important to remember that this was done by all 5 Board of Selectmen.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Yes, sir. Mr. Warburton.
Mr. Moderator, in previous years, we had taken these all together, so I'll just make my comments here for general, because I agree with Selectman Lally. Certainly, I'm very much in favor of the contracts going to the warrant, but I feel badly that we sit here and we're still not totally unified in this town. We have never had an occasion where all 6 bargaining units did not go to the voters at the same time. So let's not forget that we have a very big part of this town called Public Works, for most of the employees that do not have a contract going here. And I wasn't involved in negotiations, I have done this before, but it just makes me feel a little sad that that part of it wasn't tied up at the end. If we've had 7 years to negotiate, and we've spent 7 years, I don't know how much credit I would give if we can't finish the whole deal. But certainly the 5 that are on here, I'm going to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warburton. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Mr. Moody.
Art Moody, is this a new designation, officers? It used to be patrolmen?
Can anyone on the board answer that question?
There's always been 2 contracts, Arthur. Always been 2 police contracts.
It's sergeants and patrolmen.
Right.
This one is officers.
Yeah, that's the way it's worded in the contract.
That's a new?
That's the
There's
command.
always been 2.
So the question is whether there's any distinction between patrolmen and officers. Is that the question, Mr. Moody?
No, I think that's synonymous terms.
Okay, so they're being used as the same term. Does that answer your question, Arthur? Officers
know.
equal patrolmen? Is that what I'm
Sergeants
hearing?
sergeants and above has always had a different contract than the patrolmen. And specials.
Forget it. The other question is, I know in the 90s, they had, on presidential election year, they had a 12th holiday. They got the shift people and fire and police got an additional holiday, a 12th holiday, double time. Is that still in the contract, that 12th holiday?
There were no changes to the holidays, and I believe there are 11 holidays.
Just 11?
That's
Okay.
my
So
recollection. There were no changes, but I believe there are 11.
somehow that got out of there.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 13? Ms. Sanford?
I just want to say that I'm in support of this article and to let people know that this is only 4.9 cents per 1,000 of valuation. This has been gone over several times. We have not passed it, and I would just urge the voters to pass both of the, all of the contracts, and I would appreciate you supporting all of our departments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanford. Mr. Gopal?
Just a point of clarification, I think that what Art Moody is trying to ask is, under Article 13, within parentheses, it says officers, and if you read down further, it says officers. I guess the question is, should we make a distinction between officers and patrolmen? Or that kind of distinction is what was asked.
What I can tell you, Art, is officers is the term that was used in the preceding contract.
Okay,
2003
so
contract.
there is no patrolman involved?
That word
It includes.
That wording is not involved?
Patrolmen and officers are synonymous.
Same
Police-
as?
Police officers.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Jamie, you want to?
Chief Sullivan?
I understand the point that's being made, that the contracts had previously and always used the term patrolman, but it is an interchangeable term. I don't think it has any semantic difference at all. They are referred to as officers, patrolmen. It's a universal term.
Thank you, Chief Sullivan. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Mr. Bauer?
William Barley, 252 Landon Road, Hampton. As you know, I work for Public Works. These contracts, we've been waiting 6, 7 years to get a contract. Unfortunately, Public Works couldn't quite get it through, but maybe next year we will. We'll have a new board, look at new faces, get some new ideas. But I'm going to tell you, 6, 7 years is a long time without any money. You know, a loaf of bread costs the guys at Public Works just as much as it does somebody else in town. We're no different than anybody. We're there we do a good job, and I'm all in favor of every contract that's in this piece of paper right here. And I hope the town people vote it, because it's time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bowley. Ms. Latimer?
Just quickly, from a dollars and cents standpoint here, this is one area where the Board of Selectmen and the Budget Committee, I think, barring one vote, unanimously agreed to all of these contracts that you have before you. In a lot of the details, there's a lot of givebacks by the union that actually will be savings in future years for us. And as you've heard, one union actually will be a negative for 2013, I'm sorry, for 2012. The one thing I wanted to add to this is that in the years recently that we have not negotiated contracts, we have negotiated, and it has cost us almost $1 million, I believe, around $900,000
If
for
you-
arbitration.
No.
You got the figure on that, Dick?
If you look at the line that relates to Labor Council
Yep.
in the legal budget, that encompasses not just CBA negotiations, but anything that's labor-related, which could be litigation, the sick bank case, the Evergreen case, and so on and so on. So that's all labor.
But a lot of it has been wrapped up in there, and this has cost us
A
a
good-
considerable
a good
amount of money.
portion. Yeah, that's fair.
Yes. We're looking at a considerable amount of money every year that goes nowhere other than to go back to the table. So I think this is a win on all parts and all areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Latimer. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 13? Seeing none, Article 13 will appear on the ballot as printed. Article 14, shall the town of Hampton vote to approve the cost items included in a 2-year collective bargaining agreement reached between the Hampton Board of Selectmen and the Hampton Police Association sergeants, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing level. 2012, $16,041. 2013, $27,118. And further, to raise and appropriate the sum of $16,041, representing the additional cost attributed to the increase in salaries and benefits required by the new agreement to fund the additional cost items, Hampton Police Association Sergeant salaries and benefits for 2012. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen 5-0. Recommended by the Budget Committee 14-0. Note the above amounts are calculated as follows. 2012, $16,041, which is derived from the difference between an increase in salaries and benefits of $30,307, offset by $14,266 in health insurance savings. 2013, $27,118, which is derived from the difference between an increase in salaries and benefits of $47,182, offset by $20,064 in health insurance savings. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 14? Moved by Mr. Nichols, seconded by Mr. Lally. Mr. Nichols, would you like to speak to Article 14?
Yes. This proposal is a 2-year contract running from April 1st, 2012 to March 31st, 2014. Places employees on their proper step. There are no retroactive payments. The start step increases 5%. There is a new 1-year step that is 2.5% over the start. There's no other changes to the step effective April 1st, 2012. The steps increase 1% effective April 1st, 2013. The changes to the standard health insurance to the Matthew Thornton HMO are the same as the police officers. I'm sorry. Yep, same increase in private detail wages. Maximum vacation time for new hires is reduced to 4 weeks, and I would urge the voters to approve the police sergeant CPA.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols.
I'm sorry, I need to correct one item. The start step, as I stated, does increase by 5%. All other steps increase by 3% in the sergeant scale, and that was done to address a situation in which the high end of the patrolman scale actually exceeded the sergeant scale.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Mr. Pierce.
Yes, I wanted to make a comment on this one. I'm very much in favor of this one, plus I'm also very much in favor of all of them. But the previous one, where it was the patrolman officers, whatever you want to call our hardworking policemen, it starts the part-time folks at the beach at a higher level. So the specials we have at the beach in the summertime, and I think that's very good if we can move that up a little bit on that. So I appreciate that. Maybe we can attract more specials to the beach. That's on the previous article. I'm sorry to deviate, but there was a lot of people. I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 14? Seeing none. I'm sorry. Mr. Lassard? I need you to have to... Well, we only have two more. I received that suggestion earlier. I declined simply because, as some of the speakers have noted, it's been 6 or 7 years, and they're on the warrant. I'd like them, out of respect to the effort that's gone into getting them there, to have individual treatment. So, seeing nothing further on Article 14, Article 14 will appear on the ballot as printed. Article 15, shall the town of Hampton vote to approve the cost items included in a 2-year collective bargaining agreement reached between the Hampton Board of Selectmen and the Hampton Firefighters Local 2664, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing level: 2012, $58,579, 2013, $116,439, and further to raise and appropriate the sum of $58,579, representing the additional costs attributed to the increases in salaries and benefits required by the new agreement to fund the additional cost items, Hampton Firefighters Local 2664, salaries and benefits for 2012. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, 5-0. Recommended by the Budget Committee, 14-0. Note the above amounts are calculated as follows: 2012, $58,579, which is derived from the difference between an increase in salaries and benefits of $106,734, offset by $48,155 in health insurance savings. 2013, $116,439, which is derived from the difference between an increase in salaries and benefits of $184,238, offset by $67,799 in health insurance savings. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 15? Moved by Mr. Nichols, seconded by Mr. Lally. Mr. Nichols.
Yep, this is a 2-year contract proposal running from April 1st, 2012 to March 31st, 2014. Places employees on their proper step. There are no retroactive payments. The start step increases 5%. There's a new 1-year step, which is 2.5% over the start. There are no other changes to the step April 1st, steps April 1st, 2012. Steps increased by 1% effective April 1st, 2013. Changes to standard insurance to the Matthew Thornton HMO, again the same as the police. The work schedule changes to 24-hour shifts. Maximum vacation time for new hires is reduced to 4 weeks. And I would urge the voters to approve the Firefighters Local 2664 CBA.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Yes, Mr. Griffin.
Yes, again, I would like to recommend that we get the voters, do everything we can to get the voters to vote for these agreements. Again, I'd like to say that what was different this year was Mr. Upton, Attorney Upton. He did a wonderful job for us, and I just wish that we would have even listened to him even more, and there might have even been better things, but it's a good thing the way it is today.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Mr. Lally, and then Mr. Buck.
Yeah, just to reiterate what I said before, during the course of this, I had several opportunities to talk with Union President Matt Newton, and always professional conversations, really eager to get this thing done. Fire department was on board from the beginning to get this done, and just again, so the people at home and people here know that it never got to the point of being very, very contentious. It's a matter of everybody working together, and that's why it finally got done. So I want to thank them for that.
Thank you. Mr. Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I raised this afternoon to speak in support of these articles, and I'm not really addressing the audience here. Don't get upset. I want to address the people at home and to urge them to support these articles. The unions have been without a contract for a long time that has been mentioned, but some of the things that haven't been mentioned are, number one, these are our friends and our neighbors. And the cost of all these contracts put together, as someone mentioned earlier, was 0.047 or whatever. Well, I figured it out, and it's basically, if you took the cost of all these contracts together, it's about equivalent to 2 cups of coffee a day. And for the safety and protection that they provide, it is well worth this minimum cost, and I urge all of you to vote yes for these contracts at home. Thank you. Well, vote at the polls. All of you at home.
Thank you, Mr. Buck. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 15? Seeing none, Article 15 will appear on the ballot as printed. Article 16, shall the Town of Hampton vote to approve the cost items included in a 2-year collective bargaining agreement reached between the Hampton Board of Selectmen and the Hampton Fire Department Supervisory Association Local 3017, fire officers, which calls for the following increases in salaries and benefits at the current staffing level. 2012, minus $1,899. 2013, $12,951. And further, to approve net savings in year 1 of the agreement of negative $1,899, representing the costs attributed to the changes in salaries and benefits required by the new agreement to fund the additional cost items. Hampton Fire Department Supervisory Association Local 3017, fire officers, salaries and benefits for 2012. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen 5-0, recommended by the Budget Committee 14-0. Note the above amount calculated as follows. 2012, negative $1,899, which is derived from the difference between an increase in salaries and benefits of $26,632, offset by $28,531 in health insurance savings. 2013, $12,951, which is derived from the difference between an increase in salaries and benefits of $53,079, offset by $40,128 in health insurance savings. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 16, moved by Mr. Nichols, seconded by Mr. Griffin? Mr. Nichols.
Yes. This is a 2-year contract proposal, again running from April 1st, 2012 to March 31st, 2014. Pay rates increase 3% effective April 1st, 2012, and 2% effective April 1st, 2013. There are no retroactive payments. You may have noticed that the percentages appear a little bit higher in this CBA than they do in the others. There is no step plan in the fire supervisors union. Okay, so there is no movement to the proper step based on lack of movement over 6 years or whatever, thus the higher percentages. Same changes are involved in the health insurance as firefighters 2664 and the police unions. Like 2664, the change in the work schedule to 24-hour shifts. Maximum vacation time for new hires is reduced to 4 weeks. That would only apply if somebody would have come in from outside directly into a lieutenant or captain and so on position. I would urge the voters to approve the Fire Supervisors Local 3017 CBA. And what I would also point out is there is a handout out front with a little bit more detail on each individual CBA than I've pointed out, and that the actual multi-page tentative agreements with all of the detail of what was agreed on the table are on the town website. I would also like to move to amend Article 16 to reflect essentially some mandatory language changes required by DRA that relate to the first year of this agreement, where it's a negative number. DRA had a particular way with which they wanted to approach this.
Mr. Nichols' amendment is shown on the screen. As I understand it, it's designed to deal with the Department of Revenue Administration's concern of the use of a negative number. So that negative 1899 is replaced, and raise and appropriate language is inserted with a $0 figure. And then the second part of the amendment says that the operating budget will be reduced by $1,899 if this Article 16 passes. Is there a second to Mr. Nichols' amendment? Seconded by Mr. Lally. Do you wish to make any comment?
This is strictly language required by DRA and is mandatory.
All right. So it seems to be a form of the warrant article. I'd like to put this proposed amendment to a vote and then get to Chief Silver for his comment on the article. All those in favor of the Nichols amendment to conform the language as shown on the screen, raise your voter card, please. Down card. All opposed? I declare the Nichols amendment has passed, and the article is now amended to reflect that, those changes, and turn to Chief Silver on Article 16 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I apologize for my tardy return. I was at the Penguin Plunge, another successful Saturday high school event. I'm speaking to support all of the collective bargaining agreements, in particular the ones for the fire department, because it has an operational and organizational impact that many people don't realize. Most think that the collective bargaining agreements only benefit the employees, but in our case, what they assist the department operationally and organizationally is in the recruitment and retention of good employees. Over the past few years, we have lost junior members to Hartford, Seabrook, Exeter, Durham, Newington, all with the exception of one, relatively local seacoast departments, and one went to a hospital-based system. Employees who are in their first few years are most vulnerable to loss and are the employees that we contribute and make the most investment in. I believe that these contracts are timely and they're important to the retention of those members. I would urge you to support and vote in favor of all of these. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Silver. Mr. St. Pierre.
Ed St. Pierre, Ocean Boulevard. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't stand up here and commend this Board of Selectmen for bringing forth all of the collective bargaining agreements. Well, we are missing one of them. Certainly, this is a great step forward. I challenged you in March when we spoke to do what you could to do it. And as I mentioned in October that we shouldn't balance the budget on the backs of our employees. Certainly, I have been working for the last 6 months without a contract, and it's not a real nice thing, and I think that we really need to take care of our town employees. They're good individuals, they do a good job, and I just wanted to thank you gentlemen for bringing these forward, and let's get one more and move on.
Thank you, Mr. St. Pierre. Mr. Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Fred Rice, 15 Heather Lane. I'd like to add my strong support on all of these articles that they should be passed. There are any number of reasons why we should. We need to compensate the people that do a good job for the town appropriately. Individuals in town may disagree with individual items or individual unions or individual functions or whatever. But remember, this contract is the result of a negotiation. It's a negotiation between the representatives of the various unions that we have in town and the representatives of the Board of Selectmen, once again, whom we have elected to do the job on our behalf. And this is the result of that negotiation. As one of our previous town managers a number of years ago used to say, a good negotiation is when both parties come away equally unhappy. Now, I don't know whether they're both happy or unhappy, but it was a negotiation. They are in agreement on this. Another point is that it's very important that these all come in at the same time, and I hope that the board will do everything in its power to make sure that we get all 6 of them on the same cycle. This prevents anybody from trying to negotiate a one-up on what somebody had the previous year. It puts all of the town employees on the same sheet of music. They know they're getting the same type of benefits. They can compare themselves to the other units in town. Nobody gets screwed. Nobody gets any preferential treatment, and it saves us a lot of money in the long run. So anything that can be done to do that is really worthwhile, and I am very strongly in favor of all of these contracts. It's about time we got everything back on the track again. Thank you.
Mr. Rice, thank you. Seeing no further speakers on Article 16, Article 16 will appear on the ballot as amended. Go ahead, Ms. Moore.
Mr. Moderator, I'd like to move that we restrict reconsideration on 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16.
Seconded by Mr. Moore. All those in favor of restricting reconsideration on Articles 12 through 16, raise your voter card. Down cards. All opposed. Articles 12 through 16 are restricted from further consideration at this meeting. Article 17, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $320,000 to be placed in the Department of Public Works Equipment Capital Reserve Fund created under Article 23 of the 2008 Annual Town Meeting in accordance with the provisions of RSA 35. This sum, $320,000, to come from the undesignated general fund balance, a fund containing unexpended appropriations from prior years as of December 31, 2011, and no additional amount to be raised from taxation in this tax year. Majority vote required. Tax impact has already occurred. recommended by the Board of Selectmen 5-0, recommended by the Budget Committee 12 to 1 to 1. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 17? Moved by Mr. Pierce, seconded by Mr. Zanoy. Mr. Pierce, would you like to speak to Article 17?
Yes, what this article does, just briefly, so I know everybody's anxious to get out of here. What it is, briefly, it's money that we put in a fund to buy the big, heavy-duty, expensive items for public works. It can be an item that can be very expensive, in fact. As Mr. Vic Lessard will probably verify that some of the equipment we use moving dirt and digging ditches and all that sort of thing, and big trucks can be very pricey. And if you just tried to take it out of a budget for a big item, it would really cause a big lump. So I think that this is a good way to smooth out some of those lumps. If you have a big pricey item, you can maybe put a couple of years together to buy a thing if you have to. But year to year, we've already purchased some things out of this last year's thing, and it was for very good items that Public Works needed. And I can rest assure you that with our new Public Works Director and his assistants, that this money will be wisely spent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Mr. Noyes, would you like to be heard on Article 17?
Good afternoon, Keith Noyes, Public Works Director. Much of the services the Public Works Department provides requires the use of vehicles and equipment. They are essential tools that allow our employees to do their jobs well. It is important that these vehicles and pieces of equipment are top quality and reliable. And I would like to share that I was impressed the other night. I had to go before the Board of Selectmen, made some recommendations on some vehicles and a piece of equipment, and they are supportive of not going with the lower bids and the cheaper equipment, and I was really excited about that, so is my staff. My staff and I have produced a 5-year vehicle and equipment replacement plan that is based on a $320,000 annual appropriation. This year's proposed purchases include replacing a 1998 Dodge 1-ton dump truck, replacing a 1997 Dresser front-end loader with plow and wing, purchasing an additional pickup for the new deputy director, and purchasing an additional compaction trailer for hauling trash and recyclables. Thank you for consideration of this article.
Thank you, Mr. Noyes. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 17? Ms. Sanfey.
Hi, I just wanted to ask for some clarification. As I look at this and I read, it says to vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $320,000, but then it says that it was created with the 2008 annual town meeting with $320,000 to come from the undesignated general fund balance. And then it says at the bottom, with no additional amount to be raised from taxation in this year with a question mark, and then tax impact has already occurred. Could we better word this so that it would, because to me it's confusing. It says to raise and appropriate, but it's also saying that this money is coming already from money that's already been there from the unexpended appropriations. And then there's a question mark about the tax year.
Thank you, Ms. Sanfey. Mr. Nichols, can you address Ms. Sanfey's question?
I understand your point. Unfortunately, raise and appropriate, that wording is a requirement of DRA. I believe it's been debated by some combination of Mark and Fred. With DRA, we have no choice on that. The reality is that the funding for this, the $320,000, is coming from the undesignated general fund balance, also referred to as surplus, and there is no additional tax impact either this year or any future year.
So then could we actually take out the question mark at the end?
It's a question because all of them are questions. Shall the tax?
Okay, so you have to leave, okay. All right, thank you for that clarification.
Yep.
Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 17? Seeing none, Article 17 will appear on the ballot as printed. Article 18, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $300,000 to be placed in the Road Improvement Capital Reserve Fund created under Article 16 of the 1998 Annual Town Meeting in accordance with the provisions of RSA 35, and to fund said appropriation by authorizing the withdrawal of the sum of $300,000 from the undesignated general fund balance, a fund containing unexpended appropriations from prior years as of December 31, 2011, and no additional amount to be raised by taxation in this tax year, and to authorize the withdrawal of $611,000 from the Road Improvement Capital Reserve Fund for the improvement of the 2012 Department of Public Works Road Capital Improvement Plan to include street repairs, reconstruction, and procurement of associated materials and labor necessary to do the work, and also to include the repair, replacement, upgrades, and improvements in drainage and sewer systems under the plan for 2012 for the following streets: Exeter Road, Tuck Road, Mill Road, Kings Highway, Belmont Circle, Fairfield Drive, and Moulton Road. Majority vote required, recommended by the Board of Selectmen 5-0, recommended by the Budget Committee 10-4. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 18? Moved by Mr. Pierce. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Zanoy. Mr. Pierce, would you like to speak to Article 18? As I understand, the source of the amendment, Department of Revenue Administration had concerns about the way that Article 18 was phrased and suggested or required alternate language, which reads as follows: shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $611,000 for the purpose of making road improvements and authorize the withdrawal of $311,000 from the Road Improvement Capital Reserve Fund created under Article 16 of the 1998 annual town meeting created for this purpose, and to fund the balance of the appropriation by authorizing the withdrawal of the sum of $300,000 from the undesignated general fund balance, a fund containing unexpended appropriations from prior years as of December 31, 2011, and no additional amount to be raised by taxation in this tax year for this article to include street repairs, reconstruction, and associated materials and labor necessary to do the work, and also to include associated drainage system maintenance, upgrades, and improvements as outlined in the Department of Public Works Road Capital Improvement Plan. Majority vote required. Is there a second to Mr. Pierce's amendment? Seconded by Mr. Zanoy. Mr. Pierce, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Yes, I would. Putting aside the DRA, what they've basically done is rephrase it so it'll be less confusing as to where the money's coming from and where it's going. But what it is, in simple terms, we're taking money out of the surplus from last year and we're adding it to this fund. And then when we get done adding that money to that fund, we'll have a balance of about $611,000 that we'll be able to use in the current year. Because when you read the first part of the article as we wrote it in the beginning, you sort of might have even thought there was 900,000. That's not true. 300,000 from last year's surplus or undesignated fund balance, and then that'll bring that balance in that fund up to 611, and this article will give us permission to spend it on the roads that were defined, basically improvements on the roads that were defined in the original warrant article. It'll be such things as Tuck Road, Fairfield Drive, Belmont Circle, and so on. I can tell you from experience, when I first got elected to selectman, I walked around all these streets that were in question, and we were going to do that this last year. And as you know, we got a little slowed down in that arena, but I walked almost every one of these streets in question with drainage and sewage and so forth, and it's no doubt in my mind whatsoever. Of course, I'm not an engineer, a civil engineer. I have a degree in accounting, which doesn't do much for shoveling dirt, but on the other hand, these things need to be done. And we're trying to get the drainage better for everybody in town. I would imagine practically everybody here can vouch for the fact there's a drainage problem someplace that they're aware of. And we're doing a little piece at a time every year to try to get this out of the way and try to catch up, or whatever you want to call it. A little bit every year rather than trying to do the whole thing in one big sweep. So it's a very good investment, and we try to get the drainage under control and the sewage. So that's my feeling. I'm very supportive of this, and I think the voters should support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Ms. Woolsey, would you like to speak to the Pierce amendment?
Yes. I had an amendment to the original article. May I be authorized to present that amendment once I address this, or after this is resolved?
How about this approach?
This is pretty much boilerplate.
How about this approach? If we took a vote right now,
Right.
while you're there, to see if the body would agree to conform the language of Article 18
Right.
to meet the DRA's concerns, and then you can pick things up from there. So we have a motion. It's been seconded to amend Article 18 to address concerns in language raised by the Department of Revenue Administration. All those in favor of the Pierce amendment, raise your voter card. Down card. Any opposed? Pierce amendment carries. Ms. Woolsey, you may speak to Article 18 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. That's a good solution. I would like to move to amend the now corrected wording from DRA on this article to say, and to authorize the withdrawal of $150,000 from the Road Improvement Fund. I had to make a quick change. And I will explain why. Number
Well,
one.
let me just jump in for a second, make sure I understand it. So instead of 311,000,
Correct.
you are seeking to insert the number 150,000.
Correct.
Is there a second to Ms. Woolsey? Who is that? Ms. Nickerson seconds. So, Ms. Woolsey, would you speak to your amendment?
We're getting a little complicated with this stuff, but first of all, I applaud the amendment from DRA in the context that it's time to take this capital reserve article in hand so the public has a clear understanding what's happening here. I was going to move to amend to take out all the street names, but fortunately that has been done. This article has become very cluttered over the years, and it should be a pretty straightforward article. I have two comments that I would address here. First of all, the amount of money remaining at this point in time, per the trustees of the trust funds, is $311,000. That's all that is in this fund. The purpose of this fund is to provide the money for major road improvement and construction projects. This fund has been drained down since perhaps 2000. It hasn't really been operating properly. This fund has been drained down. Money has been raised and appropriated for several years that never went near the fund. The boards of selectmen have been bleeding this fund down to nothing. I drove to Exeter on the old road about a week ago, and the Exeter road is in terrible shape. That's a 4-mile road, probably the longest stretch of road in the town of Hampton. It desperately needs to be totally reconstructed. That's going to cost a lot of money. That's the type of project that the Road Improvement Capital Reserve Fund was designed to cover. It's not designed to cover your 100,000 and 150,000 or 80,000 construction projects. I also have a problem with this carryover stuff. This take the 300,000 out of the unexpended, undesignated fund, whatever. We're all big people. We're all grown-ups. I think that we ought to be given the respect every year as taxpayers and voters of having boards of selectmen look us in the eye and say, hey, folks, we need 200,000, 300,000 this year for this purpose. Not this squirreling away money at the end of the year, not telling the budget committee and the public, well, we've got a surplus of 600,000, 800,000, whatever dollars. I don't care. Turn the unexpended fund balance back to the public to reduce the tax rate at the end of the year, and then tell the public in the following year what they want, what we need, what the town needs to run on. Let us make an independent judgment each year. Don't feed us this stuff, which came through several years in a row about no effect on your tax rate. That's baloney. Let's be straightforward with the public. I don't want to see $611,000 authorized for withdrawal outside of this account. It will strip that road improvement capital reserve fund to the bone. And if you're going to do that, then get rid of that fund. You don't need it. You do not need it. Let the selectmen have a budget and hold $1 million in surplus. Good luck to that. Let's start being honest with the public and stop this nonsense. So I urge you to allow $150,000. If they can use that for projects, fine. That will leave a net of about 400 and whatever thousand to really kickstart that capital reserve fund. And we need to make a commitment to keep building that up to $1 million or $1.5 million for the really big projects. So I ask you please to vote for the amendment.
Ms. Woolsey, I have a question. I just want to make sure we get the proper
Yes.
Intent of your amendment.
Right.
We have taken $311,000 and reduced it to $150,000.
Right.
Do we thereby impact the other two numbers that are in
Well,
that?
you should, the raise and appropriate would be acceptable. You have 311,000 in, well, actually, you have 311,000 in the fund right now.
Yeah.
So I don't know why DRA would make one reiterate that. It's already been raised and appropriated. I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, the two numbers, 300 and 311,
The
total
three-
that sum, so I wonder if we
Right, but the
alter.
311,000 is already sitting in the fund by the trustees of the trust funds documents, and I have a copy of that, by the way, that I can give you. So I don't know why DRA would be asking for a second raise and appropriate, because the 311,000 has already been raised and appropriate. What might be more sensible is to raise and appropriate 300,000 and then offset further down when they're talking about authorizing the withdrawal, knock that down to 150,000.
So I just want to make sure I have your amendment.
Right,
I know we're clear on 311 becomes 150.
right. Well, the
Do you want
300,
to alter 611 or 300?
well, I don't know. That's a DRA question. You see what I'm saying? Because we've already raised and appropriated that 311.
Okay, all right,
311,000 is in the
yeah.
fund.
Mr. Schweitzer.
Just,
Okay.
following your logic, sir, if you have the 311 becomes 150, and you leave the other 300,000 there, the number 611 should now read 450, 450,000.
Yeah, so I think they're linked, Ms.
Okay,
Woolsey.
good. Thank you, Mike. Yeah.
So should we?
That's a good way to clean it, and I appreciate that, right.
Okay. So we'll make 611 450, is that?
Except, you know, the request is to authorize 300,000, as I understand it, from surplus at the end of 2011,
Right.
right? So the 311,000 that's already sitting in the trust fund is irrelevant. I mean, it's there, it can be tapped. You could theoretically withdraw 611,000. But
I think
we need your help again.
the gist is, right now, the article was 611 for a
Yeah.
particular purpose, and taking it from two fund sources, totaling that amount. If you alter the 311 to 150, you either have to reduce, as Mr. Schweitzer said, the gross number, or you have to increase the,
But I'm not trying to reduce the 150 from the 311. I'm trying to reduce the 150 from what they want to take out
of what?
out of the road improvement fund.
Further
The
clarification?
total.
Yeah, sure.
The raise and appropriate number is the sum total of the two pieces that you're going to be putting together. And in this case, the 300,000 is coming from the undesignated fund balance, and the 150 is coming from the capital reserve. You need to add both pieces that you are drawing out to be able to spend them, and the 450 would now be the number you would be saying, I want to allow them to spend 450,000. No, I'm sorry, but that's what the DRA language, that's why that 611 was there. It's saying that you can spend 611, and it's made up of two pieces. If you change one of the pieces, You have to change the total.
Okay, wait a minute, Michael. If this passes and the request to add 300,000
No.
from
no.
undesignated, no.
Go ahead. First off, you're not, Mr. Pierce was incorrect, I believe. We are not moving the money from undesignated to the capital reserve. We're actually raising, appropriating, and spending the 300,000. That's what the big switch was in this amendment.
So this should read, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the 300,000 for the purpose of making road improvements?
I think the DRA had that language provided by the town initially, and my understanding is that they always say, give us the gross appropriation number. Give us the big number. You've got to show the large number.
That's fine, but $311,000 is sitting now in that capital reserve fund, according to the trustees of the trust funds, and that is money that has already been raised and appropriated. The only thing you can do with that now is withdraw.
Right.
And what I'm trying to do is leave that there, not allow the whole 300,000 that they're looking for under undesignated, just 150,000 from the undesignated. So that's all they get for 2012.
Is 150,000.
Is 150,000.
Then following.
You can't possibly, that 311,000 is off the table.
Okay, so as I understand the intent of your amendment then, and Mr. Schweitzer can correct me if I misstated, it would be to raise and appropriate the sum of $150,000, authorize the withdrawal of $0 from the road improvement fund, and grab 150 from undesignated fund balance. Is that what you're trying to do?
Yes.
Okay, so with Ms. Nickerson's consent, we would change 611 to 150, we would change 311 to 0, and we would change 300 to 150.
Thank you so much for helping
Okay.
on that, but it is complicated. and
Yes.
it's gonna
And I know Mr. Noyes wants to speak to your amendment. Do you have further commentary?
Yes, in
Okay.
this context, we as a budget committee, and I as one member of the committee, have said that the new Public Works Director has a terrible burden. He's inherited a department that's been terribly neglected and has a lot of problems and a lot of needs. We and I understand that there is a lot of work to be done. However, he's only one person. He's got the Church Street Pump Station, I hope, on his agenda for the coming year. And I would like to see, and there is money, by the way, in the operating budget for drainage, et cetera. So there is other money available here. I would like to see a head start. Mr. Znoy, and we're going to come to an area of agreement here. Mr. Znoy has been complaining for the last 3 years. We got to do the roads, do the roads, do the roads, and we're scrambling to do roads in October and November. Do we have to do roads? Yes. But I think I would like to see a start this year of the 150,000, build up that capital reserve road improvement fund, and then as the years go on and as the Public Works Department becomes more stabilized, then start seeing more money for road improvement.
Thank you, Ms. Woolsey. Mr. Noyes, to the Woolsey amendment.
Well, I thought I was doing pretty well until now, and I appreciate your concern over my workload. What I'd like to say is that the vast majority, well, number one is there's not nearly enough money in this budget to even get caught up with our paving program. We're trying to develop a paving program that will repave every road within a 15-year period. Because the way asphalt deterioration works is it's on pretty much of a cycle, whereas after 15 years, the deterioration of the road, the asphalt accelerates. And up till 15 years, you can do a pretty worthwhile and fairly inefficient repair. But once it gets beyond 15 years, the elasticity in the asphalt breaks down, and then it costs twice the amount of money to rejuvenate or repair that roadway. In order for us to develop a 15-year cycle, we need to get on top of it, and time is of the essence. That's where I came up with the plan, because the beauty about Exeter Road is that there's no underground utilities that we have to worry about. And one of the biggest mistakes that I found, one of the many mistakes that I found since I've been here, is that in the past what they would do is excavate into a road, replace the utilities, and then repave the road the same year, which only lends itself to all kinds of nice baths for the birds, because it just creates dips in the road because the roads haven't had a full opportunity to compact. So what I've tried to institute is a 2-year time frame, 2 freeze-thaw cycles before that we would repair or resurface any roads. So we would go into a road 1 year, replace the water, sewer, drain lines, gas lines, or whatever, wait for 2 years, then go back there and do the final coat of pavement, which leads to a good job. The beauty, once again, about Exeter Road, one, it's in very poor condition, and it's beyond that 15-year life cycle where it's literally falling apart, and you can all take a ride up there after this, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. The road's full of alligator cracking, longitudinal cracking, and so forth. If we wait too much longer to do that, it's going to be, maybe I'm exaggerating when I say twice the amount of cost, but surely 60, 70, 75% more cost to do that work. So if you drop this down to $150,000, I can tell you right now, there'll be no work done on Exeter Road, because those funds are going to have to be used to repave the roads that this past year we did excavation, particularly in those areas that used that had drainage work. My staff and I are already on track with coming up with a long-term paving program, which will be a 5-year or more period. We're out there reviewing all the signage. We're doing this as a comprehensive package. When I came here, there was a pavement management program. I was not overly thrilled with that. We hired that out. Now we are doing that 80% in-house with about 20% support for some of the college interns from the Thompson School and UNH. So I would ask that you keep all the money that you can in there, and I'd even appreciate it if you'd add some more money to go with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Noyes. Mr. Bridle.
Paul, at some point.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, Russ Bridle, 225 Toll Farm Road. I would hope we'd support our Public Works Director and what he's asking for. He's right. You go Exeter Road between the railroad bridge and Toll Farm Road, and it's an absolute disgrace. That's our entrance to our town. That's where we're getting. If you look downtown right now, you'll look and see. I think we have one, if I'm not mistaken, untaken storefront. The rest of them have all been taken up. And I believe that other one that's there is under agreement. That's something we haven't had in this town in a long time. We're trying to build this town as a great community. We're getting some businesses in there. We've got to have good roads to get there. My only other suggestion was, and I hope the Public Works Director will look at it, is Toll Farm Road. If you look at Toll Farm Road between 95 and Timber Swamp Road, it's terrible. He talks about alligator cracks and everything else. You see that there. And what I just want to remind people is, just like the other day when we had an accident on Route 1, they closed traffic on Route 1. The only other way you got to get there is to go to the beach to go around, or Toll Farm Road. And we have tractor trailers, and we have cars, and we have a number of people out there, and that road is in terrible shape. So I'd hope they look at that, but I'd say we suggest what the Public Works Director does and move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Bridle. Mr. Nichols.
Yeah, I'd like to bring up a slide which addresses the specific issue Ms. Woolsey brought up about the use of the undesignated general fund balance. Keep going, 2 to the right. Okay. Basically what you see here is from the period 2008 through 2011, actuals, what's actually taking place in the municipal portion of the taxes on an average single-family home. So again, the red is actuals for 8, 9, 10, and 11, and then what you see at the red is our forecast out over the next 5 years of municipal taxes should all of the money articles on the 2012 warrant be approved. What you see over the past 3 years in particular, we've had decent-sized surpluses, 2009, 10, and 11. The instructions that we've given the financial director is to use enough of the undesignated general fund balance or surplus to maintain a level municipal tax rate, and we've done that. Between 2009 and 2011, we've used roughly about $650,000 to maintain a flat tax rate. If you look at what has gone on between the reality and the forecast that we have going forward to 12 and 13, what we're doing is maintaining a tax rate that has actually gone down. Our instructions were keep it flat, but we've actually done better than that. So you've seen a very gradual decline in the municipal portion of the taxes through 2011, and by virtue of the fact that we haven't used all of the surplus from that year, as was advocated by Mrs. Woolsey, we're able to continue. We should be able to continue to maintain through 2013 a flat municipal tax on a single-family home. Had we done as Mrs. Woolsey advocated, okay, and used all of the surplus in a given year, what would have transpired is what you see in the purple or blue bars. So the end result is, rather than having a nice steady, and in this case steady down, we would have driven it way down only to have it come way back up and beyond. Well, I guess if you were moving out of town in 2010 or 2011, that might have looked like a good approach. But if you were somebody that moved into town in 2010, you'd say, what the heck is going on with our taxes? So what this board has opted for over the last 3 years is to use that fund in a manner that we maintain a steady level of taxes with a slight downward direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Mr. Moody.
Art Moody. I didn't get a chance to talk on the DRA amendment, but it was absolutely correct. The original article was illegal. You cannot have one vote, one yes, no vote, to put into the capital reserve and take it out. Now, I heard somebody say that the roads have been, the list of roads have been taken off. It has? It's always been in there for 14 years, whenever there was this article in there.
The language of that amendment did not include specific roads.
Why was it taken out, Board of Selectmen?
Can anyone answer Mr. Moody's question as to why those streets that were originally appeared in Article 18 do not appear in the amendment?
The reference
Mr. Jarrell.
is, there's referenced in there the capital improvements plan of Public Works, and that's what outlines the roads.
Well, I would assume that that plan was reflected by those roads, or
Correct.
vice versa.
That's
Well,
correct.
one of the roads was Moulton Road, and it was on about 3 years ago and never done. 5 of these 7 roads that were there are also listed in Article 28, $145,000 for drainage. And this is drainage. It's not only double taxation or double appropriation, but the operating budget also has drainage money. So therefore, I support the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Mr. Lassard.
I would like to speak on this. As an old selectman, in the old days when a handshake was the way we worked was pretty good. We used to carry so much a year for patching. All of a sudden, that disappeared. We used to carry enough to keep things maintained. In the last, I hate to keep saying this, the last, I want to say 10 years, I watched things go downhill bad. And what you got to do, and when he said hot top goes to pot, it does go to pot. And a few guys up there knew a little bit about it and got out there, but I'm not going to be a lawyer, I'm not going to be a hairdresser, I'm not going to be an accountant or a lawyer. But I know my job, and I was taught by the best. You don't throw the baby out with the dishwater. You have to maintain what you've got, and at the same time, keep up on it. Right now, if we don't take care of, I would say, how many years ago Bell and Flynn did Timber Swamp Road? I patched a hole up Timber Swamp Road the other day myself. I patched it because I live in that street, and I don't want to see it go to hell in plain English. But it seems like you get up, you got a guy right now, Public Works Director. He works for you. He tells you what he would like to do. And you're telling the selectmen what you want him to be able to do. And you people are telling the people what you want it done. But I begin to, to get tiresome out here, to hear this all the time. First of all, let's face it. A lot of people don't want to spend a dime. But yet you selectmen want the people here tonight, a contract that was done in 1933, you want us to maybe go along with them giving the sidewalks back to us. I say no. And I'm saying right now, let's do what we've got. Let's maintain what we got. That or let's quit. You either got to do it and do it right, or forget about it. And I don't know, Mary Louise, if that couple $100,000 that you want to take out, if we can save a road with that. I want to save the road now. Now, I want to say one thing. Rusty mentioned he had some bad roads out there, right, Rusty? All right. But I heard you say, let's bring the sewage over. Well, let's do one thing or the other. We either bring the sewage over, then do those roads, or let's do it now. But you haven't been up there 50 years. Billy Bowley will tell you, you haven't been up there 50 years. But I will tell you this, before I want you to spend a dime on Timber Swamp Road, I'd rather have a good road than sewage in Timber Swamp Road. They need it in Toll Farm. They need all that down there. But remember, we're not going to put a new road in and then dig it back up. And so that's what, it's got to be understood. And we got to do it, and we got to do it fast.
Thank you, Mr. Lassard. Back to Ms. Woolsey quickly, and then we'll
Really
take a vote.
quick follow-up, and I'm going to go back to Jerry again. Why do you have $300,000 left at the end of 2011 that was not spent on roads last year? If you need road work done so desperately, why wasn't that money spent on roads? You've got an extra article in here every single year on the warrant to appropriate money to that capital reserve fund, and you're stripping that fund. It's useless. Either take that off the warrant, ask the public next year to discontinue that fund, don't have it anymore, save us an article on the warrant, and raise and appropriate the money as you go. We appropriated a budget. You had a budget for 2011. You didn't spend all that budget. You didn't turn in the leftovers to the taxpayers, and you didn't do the roads. $300,000 would pay to do some roads. And now you're looking at us here, and you want to grab $611,000 and strip that capital reserve fund, and I say that's wrong.
Thank you, Ms. Woolsey. Let's go out and take a vote. No, I want to get a sense of the meeting. We've got the Woolsey amendment, and that is to reduce the sum of $611,000 down to $150,000, and its source will be from an undesignated general fund balance of $150,000, and the 311 becomes a zero. Can we get that on the screen? Are we having problems?
Electricity is an issue.
Okay. Does everyone understand what we're doing? We're moving 611 down to 150. That is the Woolsey amendment. If you are in favor of the Woolsey amendment, you are in favor of reducing the figure from $611 to $150,000. All those in favor, raise your voter card. Down cards. All opposed? I declare that the amendment has failed. The article is back to 611, 311, and 300. Is there any further discussion on Article 18? Seeing none, we will have Article 18 appear on the ballot as it was amended. So we'll have 611, 311, and 300. We're on to Article...
Bob, I'd like to restrict reconsideration on 17 and 18.
Mr. Nichols has moved to restrict reconsideration of Articles 17 and 18. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Zanoy. All those in favor, raise your voter card. Down cards, all opposed. 17 and 18 have been restricted from further discussion. Article 19, shall the town of Hampton vote to amend the second sentence of section 2:601 of the sewage use and construction ordinance that now reads, there shall be no additional out-of-town sewage and sewer systems added to our Hampton sewer system, so that the same would then read, there shall be no additional out-of-town sewage and sewer systems added to our Hampton sewer system, except that the town of Hampton will accept wastewater originating from the Northampton State Beach in conjunction with the rehabilitation by the state of its bathhouse at said state beach to commence in 2012 via connection into the town of Rye force main sewer pipe that conducts wastewater to Hampton's wastewater treatment plant under the agreement for treatment and disposal of wastewater October 1989 for however long that agreement remains in effect, and to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into a memorandum of agreement between the towns of Hampton and Rye and the State of New Hampshire Department of Resources and Economic Development, Division of Parks and Recreation, whereby the state will implement the above connection with the town of Rye force main sewer line, and the town of Hampton will be paid by the town of Rye for the resulting additional input into Hampton's wastewater treatment plant of wastewater from the Northampton State Beach, which is not expected to have any significant effect on the available capacity or process capability of the wastewater treatment plant on the same terms as the town of Rye now pays the town of Hampton under the October 1989 agreement. Majority vote required, recommended by the Board of Selectmen, 5-0. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 19, moved by Mr. Griffin, seconded by Mr. Lally? Mr. Griffin, would you like to speak to Article 19?
Well, I think as you read it, it tells you quite a bit of information right there, but this is one of those articles that seems to be a lot of misconceptions about what's being done here. Number one, we are a community where it's very important to us here in Hampton that there isn't a problem with waste coming from Northampton that would pollute our beaches. And we need to work together with the state. We do not have a problem with the amount of capacity that we have. And this is something that we also are working with the town of Rye, because that line that goes through there is the Rye sewer line. And this is something that we've worked to make sure that everything here goes the right way, and the state is taking over the responsibility, the liability. If anything goes wrong, they will be the ones that will be maintaining when something has to be done. If anything breaks down or whatever, we don't have the ability to have our insurance take care of it, so the state is going to step in and do what they have to do to make sure this runs right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. There are two individuals from the state of New Hampshire who are here today who've expressed an interest to speak to this body about Article 19. They are Philip Bryce, who is the Director of the Department of Resources and Economic Development, Division of Parks and Recreation, and Thomas Mansfield, who's a Public Works Project Manager. I would ask the body if you would agree to hear from these two gentlemen relative to Article 19. All those in favor of hearing from these state representatives, raise your card, down cards. All opposed? Gentlemen, Mr. Bryce.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you everyone for allowing us to speak. On behalf of the Division of Parks and Recreation, I'd like to thank the town of Hampton for considering our request to send sewage from Northampton State Beach to the Hampton wastewater treatment plant. There are a few fact sheets I've put out back. If you're interested in picking up one, there's also information on our website, and also please feel free to call me directly if you have any questions or concerns. The state would like to continue our investment in the seacoast by connecting a new bathhouse at Northampton to the wastewater treatment plant through the Rye sewer line. The current situation at Northampton Beach is truly unacceptable, and we need to work to fix that. We believe that, and we also believe that improving the condition at any one park along the seacoast benefits all the communities along the seacoast. To speak briefly to some of the details of the project, I'll turn it over to Tom Mansfield.
Mr. Mansfield.
Thank you very much, and thank you for considering this request. The Division of Parks and Recreation for New Hampshire State Parks has a problem at Northampton Beach with deteriorated facilities. Our toilet building there was put in 1980. It's really badly worn out. It's so badly worn out it's hard to maintain. We have, after many years of trying to keep this building going, we finally gotten capital appropriation from the state legislature for $450,000 to make improvement at the state beach. So we would like to go ahead and replace that toilet building with a newer toilet building, more up-to-date and a little larger toilet building, and one that carries the architectural character and quality of the project we just did on Hampton Main Beach, so that we have the state park character moving right up the coastline. That's all fairly straightforward. We have a second problem at Northampton State Beach, which is that our sewer system disposal has failed. Our leaching field has actually blocked up. This happened as far back as 2004, I'm sorry to say, and all this time we've been operating that facility using our septic tank as a holding tank. This means that we have to have a pumper truck come in somewhere in the vicinity of 4 or 5 times a week to pump that tank out during the summer so that we can operate the toilet buildings that we have there. When this problem happened, we approached the Department of Environmental Services to see if it would be all right to replace the leaching field in kind, and they informed us that we were in proximity to the ocean such that they couldn't do that anymore. The rules wouldn't allow that. So we're looking for another alternative to handle our sewage. On our site, the force main from the town of Rye goes right across the length of the beach on an easement that we gave them on our property and passes within 50 feet of the proposed new toilet building. So our best and most cost-effective alternative for handling our sewage would be to tie into that main. We understand that that main comes down to the Hampton treatment plant and that we have to ask the town meeting for permission to do this. We're hoping that you will agree to this. We see the state beach as a public benefit for all the citizens of New Hampshire. It's a facility which could improve tourism in New Hampshire, and tourism is one of our big industries. And I think that it will also be a much safer environmental way to handle waste. Right now, our pumper truck has to open up our tank, pump into his tanks, and then he drives the truck to the town of Hampton sewage treatment plant and dumps it in there. On both ends, that leaves possibilities for spills. It's unpleasant, difficult, and expensive. So we're hoping that actually tying into the sewer will be better for both parties. Thank you very much for considering this. We'll be available to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Mansfield. Mr. Bryce, do you have any further comment? I don't. Okay. Mr. Diner. And then who's up here?
Jay Diener, 206 Woodland Road. I'm going to be brief on this, I'm sorry. I'm in favor of this article. I think it's a good situation for Northampton. I think it's at no cost to the people of Hampton, which I think is a plus. My concern is the potential environmental risks to the beaches of New Hampshire on the ocean and to the waters of our ocean if we don't do this project. There are too many risks to be comfortable dealing with. The potential costs, if there are spills that we have to clean up, are going to be far greater than if we spend the money or let the state and Northampton spend the money to put this project in. So I hope the town will support this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diner. Mr. Zanoy?
Yeah, I got a little bit of insight here I'll pass on to you. You know, what they're going to give us is a sniff. Really, we'll never see it. You're talking about 100,000 gallons max over the course of 16 weeks. We take over 1 billion gallons a year through the wastewater plant. We're talking about a very, very 0.01% or something. It's like spitting in the ocean and going back a week later and trying to find it. I mean, it's better to get it this way, believe me, because before they were coming in with septic systems and going right into the concentrated waste tanks for storage. And to process that stuff, as concentrated it is, we have to wait until we have enough primary sludge before we can deal with their secondary sludge. So I'd much rather get it in a diluted fashion to the extent of 0.01% impact than getting honey trucks or septic systems backing up, septic tanks, trucks backing up, and delivering it into our waste holding tank. And we have to hold it there until we have enough primary so that we can feed it in and mix it, because our press only does a mix. It can't handle secondary by itself, and that's what they would be delivering. Now, our new press that we're going to be getting shortly will handle both. You know, it's been designed to handle both, but the existing press that we have cannot. So this is really a no-brainer. We need this to keep our oceans clean, number one, because they would be composting out in their yard there somewhere as an alternative. To take it through the ride, there's no other houses being added anywhere. There's no scare tactics here. It's just a flow that over 16 weeks, the total flow in a given year will be less than my home in total. So that's kind of my take on it.
Thank you, Mr. Noy. Mr. Warburton.
Mr. Moderator, I rise and support this article very much. It's another example of what happens when people work together. I want to commend the board, Senator Stiles, our state reps, Chairman Nyan of the Hampton Beach Commission, certainly, and finally, State Parks. As many of you know, I spent 6 years as your Seacoast superintendent, and I have to tell you, Northampton was a nightmare, to say the least. And I would also like to say that it's very unusual to see any dread management down here at any time, but I want to commend Director Bryce and I find one of the finest people as a state employee, and Tom Mansfield, who was the State Parks architect. The reason this is very important, too, is that it's the right thing to do when you look at, we want people to fix up their properties, we want people to move here, we visit here, recreate here, and it all helps the total state income as well as the local communities. My last summer in 2010, we literally had a major problem there. And as a matter of fact, we had to close down those bathrooms for 3 days. We had 10 porta potties, and it was hard to manage. So by connecting and going through RISE, certainly, and the state will be billed for all of this, it just adds another element to make sure that we're doing the good things, all the communities together within and working with the state of New Hampshire to get our facilities upgraded. As you know, as part of this plan, Tom Mansfield explained it at the public hearing, that we're going to also get a new bathroom there too. So I'm very much in favor, and I hope that people will come out and vote this. And once again, I thank all the folks involved, and best of luck on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nyan.
Mr. Moderator, I come in support of this warrant article, and I come as the chairman of the Hampton Beach Area Commission, so I'm speaking on behalf of the commission on this warrant article. I, too, believe that it's so important to connect everybody in a working relationship and everybody being collaborative, and I think this is a great project where the state, the towns, communities, the Board of Selectmen, Beach Commission, and everybody else involved put together what I think is a very, very strong plan, a very complete plan. For those of you that have seen the Hampton Beach redevelopment project, that was done by a fine engineer from DRED, Tom Mansfield, and Tom is the project manager of this particular project, so I feel very confident that that job will be done and done well. So not to belabor the point and not to repeat I say to you that we should support this warrant article. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nyan. Mr. Bridle.
Yeah, again, Russ Bridle, 225 Toll Farm Road. I'm also in support of this article. I think we have one of the five cleanest beaches in the country, and that's because we've worked hard in this town to promote that and make sure it gets done. The state's done a great job at cleaning the beaches and doing that. I would hate to see the pollutants from that come down to our beaches and do that. The one thing I want to make sure that we know is, last year, the Board of Selectmen asked us to reverse a decision that we'd had on the vote for the year before on accepting RISE sewer. And you told us at that point in time that we had plenty of space, we had plenty of storage, we had plenty of capability. Well, the ink was hardly dry on the ballots, and we were hearing from the state that you had to have a
moratorium because we didn't have enough space. As long as we have enough space, and Mr. Zanoy, I understand, but you're talking 8 flush toilets here and 5 urinals. If you have that many in your house, I'd like to see your house. So,
No,
again, I support this, and I hope everybody else does too.
Oh, I can assure you, we have enough capacity. The problem we had last year was due to the lack of preventative maintenance on the press. Once that thing is running, we're banging at 35 to 40% utilization of that press at current. So we got plenty of capacity. It's not the issue at all.
Thank you, Mrs. Zanoy. Ms. Gate.
Ellen Gaethel, 23 Ridgeview Terrace. I'm going to be really quick. This is a no-brainer for the residents of the town of Hampton. The toilets we're talking about are adjacent to the Hampton line and the beach that all of us as residents use. And so keeping Northampton Beach State Park clean is definitely something that will benefit us. I urge you to vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moody.
Art Moody, nothing but a love fest.
Don't spoil the party.
The giveaway Board of Selectmen,
Arthur, don't be the skunk at the lawn party.
I didn't hear you.
Go ahead.
The state of New Hampshire, you know, is just not the Department of Division of Parks and Recreation, the Bureau of Public Works, which I think is still part of the Department of Transportation. It's the liquor store, been in our sewer system for a couple of years. I don't think it's paid a cent. I'm not sure, but I doubt it. And boards of selectmen opposed those 2 liquor stores. I'm just wondering what was dumped on the taxpayers of Hampton last year by the state of New Hampshire. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of a state government that says we're no longer going to subsidize local pensioners in our state pension fund, which they pushed to put local employees in the first place. And we're paying all that extra money to cover the state subsidy. In 2 school districts, the town, the county, since the towns and cities pay the county budget. The DOT has said that after 75 years, we're not going to maintain the sidewalks.
Arthur, I can see a connection here, but I've got to get you to speak to the article.
There is a connection.
Okay, but I understand the state is that there's an agreement, there's payment here, so I need you to speak to whether this is, whether you're in favor or opposed to Article 19 based on the terms of the warrant article, please.
I'm opposed from bringing any new sewage from out of town, being a servant of the towns. You'll remember that a couple of years ago, the Division of Parks offered the sale of some state parks across the state, or lease to nonprofits or governments. Northampton selectmen are in favor of anything, and they responded that they were in favor of taking over that beach. I guess there was criticism in the legislature, so the Division of Parks withdrew that. But it may come back, and we become a servant of another town that separated from this town, and then did nothing but sue us afterwards. We passed this amendment at a special town meeting, no additional from out of town. And I think the voters were greatly in favor of that. And now we have Rye Sewer that we get very little from compared to what we have to pay Exeter for our connection to their plant per hookup. And I'm sure we'll get much less now than we will from septage from this facility. And there's just so much that the state is dumping on us that I don't think we should accommodate the state. And their plan B or C should be brought up again.
Thank you, Ms. Moody. Ms. Latimer?
Eileen Latimer, 251 Mill Road. Speaking in favor of this article, but as a resident, not as chairman of the Budget Committee, because there is no money to this article. This does not come before the Budget Committee. But speaking about this article, we heard from the state that right now they're bringing about 4 loads a week out of the septic system that's there to be dumped, and it's already being dumped at our wastewater treatment plant, so we're not taking really anything else on. The difference is that currently we do not pass through in that rate structure improvements. Under this structure we would, as we do to Rye. Although it's proportionate to the flow, what we have done, simply like the $1.3 million investment in fixing the pumps, that portion, or a portion of that, gets passed through to Rye. Since Northampton will be paying Rye, therefore that will now get passed on to Northampton. The way it is right now, they're dumping this at the wastewater treatment plant, but under the current situation, they're not paying any of that part. So that's a win and for us. I think as we partner with the state, and certainly we can battle back and forth, and Arthur, you got a lot of correct things to say about that. You know, we're battling in arenas that we shouldn't have to battle in, but maybe this is a step in the right direction. And for anybody who thinks that, you know, pollution will stop when it gets to the Hampton line and say, no, we're Northampton pollution, it doesn't happen. So I would ask you to vote in favor of this article. Thank you.
Ms. Latimer. We're going to go to Mr. Rice and Mr. St. Pierre, and then we're going to take a vote on the sense of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Fred Rice, 15 Heather Lane. This ought to be the biggest slam dunk on the warrant today. This is something that's badly needed. We're already bringing in the sewage in a truck. It's much more efficient, much safer, much more dependable. People just put it in the pipeline right there and bring it down here. It is the equivalent of one house, but the house is very, very full in the summertime, and there's nobody around in the wintertime. That's how it averages out, even though there are more urinals. If nobody comes in to use the bathroom facilities in the winter, it doesn't create anything then. But the yearly average is just about a house. Okay, so it's 2 houses. It's still not very much. We are nowhere near the contracted amount. There are those who say, oh, we're not getting paid enough. We are getting paid the same amount now as when we negotiated this contract for that amount and a much bigger potential capacity a number of years ago. This is also not the time to bring up 23-year-old grudges. A kid that wasn't even born when this contract was put together has already graduated from college. Let's get realistic and start dealing with the future. We don't live in a zero-sum environment. We don't live in an isolationist environment. It is our job as members of the Seacoast community to try and support our neighbors to the north and the south and try and make it a better place for everyone. If we don't do this, the alternative is that you're going to have a compost toilet that at an extreme flood condition could contaminate the entire area along the seacoast. Let's not have that. Let's put the grudges aside, the petty stuff about a penny here on your tax rate over 10 years, so forth. Let's put something in that's going to make the whole area better and start planning for the future. I'm starting to get a little bit tired of the people who keep wanting to live in the past. Hampton is an old town, but we don't have to have an old way of thinking about things.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mr. St. Pierre. Senator Stiles, are you in line? Yes, I am. Okay. Excuse me. Mr. St. Pierre. Thank you.
Ed St. Pierre, Ocean Boulevard. I just wanted to speak to this. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm involved in the beautification at the beach, trying to make the beach a better place, try to attract people. And I just see this as an extension of that, as well as helping out a neighbor. If your neighbor had a septic system problem and you had a way to allow them to go through your property, maybe to hook into a line or whatever it takes, it's neighbor helping neighbor. This is the gateway to the community. It cleans up the beach. It attracts a better clientele. It moves right along with what we're seeing right in the main beach. It's going to be another bathhouse just like that. And, you know, many of our residents will use this facility. I mean, people go to the beach plum all the time. You can't tell me that, you know, they're not going to like the idea that they can use the bathroom across the street without having to go to an outhouse. I just think it's a no-brainer. It's very small. Like they say, it's coming to us anyway, so let's do the right thing, help out the neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. St. Pierre. Senator Stiles, and then we'll take a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Nancy Stiles, 1 Hayden Circle in Hampton, and I would just like to let the public know that this is decision year in Northampton. Either they'll be able to connect to the sewer line that runs from Rye into Hampton, delivering their effluent in a much better fashion, or they will have to compost. And I have great concerns about composting 10 feet from the ocean. So I would urge the citizens of Hampton to please support this article. There's no cost to the town of Hampton. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Stiles. All those in favor of closing discussion on Article 19, if you would raise your voter card. Down cards, all opposed. Article 19 is closed. We'll move on to Article 20. Shall the town of Hampton... Mr. Nichols?
Move from reconsideration, Article 19.
We have a motion to restrict reconsideration on Article 19. Moved, and who's the second? We have a second. Mr. Gopalan for a second. All those in favor of restricting reconsideration on Article 19? Down cards. All opposed. Article 19 is restricted from further consideration of this meeting. Article 20, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $100,000 to be placed in the compensated leave trust fund approved under Article 30 of the 2009 annual town meeting. Said sum, $100,000 to come from the undesignated general fund balance, a fund containing unexpended appropriations from prior years as of December 31, 2011, and no additional amount to be raised by taxation in this tax year, and to amend the trust by placing therein the following additional purpose in line 3 as published in the warrant for the 2009 under Article 30, after the words payment of compensated leave to employees, the words and such other assessments from the state of New Hampshire as are assessed at the time of an employee's retirement or severance from employment, and to add the same words after Board of Selectmen shall be agents of the town to expend such funds when required to pay for compensated leave, so that the amended 2009 trust article would read as follows. Shall the town of Hampton vote to create a compensated leave trust fund in accordance with the provisions of RSA 31:19A for the purpose of placing in trust funds appropriated for the payment of compensated leave to employees and such other assessments from the state of New Hampshire as are assessed at the time of an employee's retirement or severance from employment, in order to fully fund such benefits over time to avoid the expenditure of large unanticipated sums that would otherwise endanger the financial and operational requirements of the town. Funds shall be transferred at the discretion of the Board of Selectmen from the annual operating budget to fund such trust, and the Board of Selectmen shall be agents of the town to expend such funds when required to pay for compensated leave and such other assessments from the state of New Hampshire as are assessed at the time of an employee's retirement or severance from employment upon separation from the town by eligible employees. 2/3 vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen 5-0, not recommended by the Budget Committee 8-5-1. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 20? Moved by Mr. Zanoy. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Nichols. Mr. Zanoy, would you like to speak to Article 20?
Yeah, this is a new one because it hasn't come up in my previous 2 years, but it makes sense. And I was kind of slow to come around on this one. But when I had the facts laid before me, I went with it. I agreed with the suggestion. You know, people are retiring, and we have 2 lines in the current budget. 11, by the way. We had an employee separation cost. We had $212,000 in that line item. And we had bank buyback. We had $120,000 in that one. We spent 95% of that money. Mr. Schwartzer has indicated that we're living on the edge here. And, you know, the average annual payout for these 2 line items has been 90% or so or greater. In the last 7 years, we blew the budget in some cases by 161%. We went over it by 161%. In other cases, we came under it and only used 41%, like a $400,000 swing. We currently owe about $1 million or so, $1.2 million in accrued liabilities for people who could retire. The decision to retire is up to the people and the employees, and they only need 14 to 16 days' notice. It can occur anytime during the year. If employees decided to leave early in the year, we might have time to fund shortfalls. But if they decide to leave at the end of the year, we may not have the year-end savings to fund it. Like if they decide to leave in November, December. So we need a long-term vehicle to deal with these potential shortfalls. And funding the compensated leave trust fund, which was established in 2009. We haven't any money in it, at least until this year, would allow access to monies to cover these shortfalls without impacting the annual budget. This fund could also be used to pay for other retirement-related costs, spiking, and so on, that the state might pay on us. ISA, this is the first time it's come up in my tenure, and I questioned this before I bought in. So I made them go back and show me from Missouri. Show me the years and what the budgets looked like and what did we spend and so on. And I came away convinced that we needed to protect ourselves a little bit here. And it's part of management of the town. It's part of financial management, good management, business management. So I endorse the article and move it forward.
Thank you, Mr. Zanoy. Mr. Schweitzer, would you like to speak to Article 20?
Mr. Zanoy, thank you very much. You've basically covered every point
that
I really wanted to make. Thank you very much. I would just draw attention, it's on the second page, the words, in order to fully fund such benefits over time to avoid the expenditure of large, unanticipated sums that would otherwise endanger the financial, operational requirements of the town. This is, to me, an insurance policy. Because, as Mr. Zanoy said, some years, the $300,000 that we have budgeted, perfectly fine. We're running right around there, that's great. But these issues are not really under our control. They're under the control of the employees who, when they decide to retire, can pass these, or we have to pay these costs. And I've seen it as high as $600,000-$700,000 in 1 year in the accounts that we're specifically saying. And if it happens in the end of the year, when we're going towards the end of our budget, that kind of money is going to be very difficult to find. This gives us the safety position that we really need. I support this very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schweitzer. Anybody else wishing to be heard on Article 20? Mr. Gopalin.
And Art Gopalin, 20 Windmill Lane. Mr. Schweitzer mentioned that some years it has peaked to 600,000 with 300,000 on the books. However, this amount that you are putting in is only $100,000. What is the rationale for $100,000 would protect you when you have an experience of $600,000 in the prior years? That's number one question. The second question is, how does this protect the town from the spiking charges that's always looming in the horizon? It's being kicked down, I think, to the next year as usual at the State House. But to me, this $100,000 may not support or may give the false impression that having $100,000 will protect the town from those expenses that I don't think we have accounted for.
Thank you, Mr. Gopalin. Is there anyone on the board who would like to address his two questions? Mr. Nichols.
Yeah, I'll take that question. What was initially proposed was $250,000 for that amount. Where we ended up was $100,000, to be honest with you. I think part of that was, I'm not sure, I'll pick on Jerry, how much of an understanding.
Part of that was Mr. Zanoy, yes it was.
and having an understanding of exactly what was involved with this. Essentially, by moving $100,000 into this account, we're not changing any expenses. That liability is still there. We still have $1.2 million in accrued liability. When that individual or individuals retire, that liability comes due. In some years, you might spend $150,000. There have been years that were $500,000 or $600,000. I think where we ended up is $100,000 is better than having nothing in the account. However, I would have preferred that it had $250,000 in there. There is no tax impact because it's being funding from the undesignated general fund balance. So we're essentially moving it from one fund to another. The problem is if you have excessive amounts of employee retirements in any one given year and you hit a $500,000, $600,000 level, you can't use money in the undesignated general fund balance to pay those bills. So you have to find it somewhere else in the budget, and that can be problematic, particularly if a bunch of people retire in November or December. Maybe Mr. Zanoy might want to make an amendment to up that amount to $250,000.
You know, whatever year-end savings we have.
In terms of spiking, okay, to your, you used the term doesn't protect us from spiking or whatever. It offers us no protection from spiking if the legislature continues to move forward and spiking does actually come into effect beginning July 1st, 2012. We are still faced with the possibility of getting bills related to spiking. We just have another source of trying to fund that. Okay, so it provides basically somewhere if we get a surprise and we get a $100,000 or $150,000 or whatever spiking bill in July or August or whatever, we don't have to go cutting something else out in the operating budget. But I firmly believe that the amount should be funded gradually, but starting out higher than what it is.
The $100,000 that you have, is that going to improve the probability such that what Mike Schwartzer talked about, $600,000, it sort of mitigates some, but not necessarily the whole thing. But I'm hoping that the mitigation is big enough that the probability that you are buying with $100,000 is big enough to not have to go into a panic mode in December.
Yeah, Art, I'd like to add a little bit on what Dick just said. You know, my thinking is that, you know, first of all, 2011 was a tumultuous year for municipal workers because the pension program was revised. And people didn't know how it was going to end up. What was it, Dick? House Bill 541 or whatever it was, the pension reform?
It was actually SB 3 that ended up in
SB 3, yeah. So people were very uneasy about how that pension reform was going to happen, and so we got, I thought, a blip in retirements, okay, that we shouldn't ordinarily see every year. We did get a blip in retirements because of people thinking that their retirement fund might get, or their retirement plan might get affected, because that thing was in process for almost right up until June or so. So I took that into consideration. And the other thing was, is if you got $300,000 or $400,000 in end-of-year savings, I don't want all the eggs in one basket. We need to take care. We need to take that money and move it around so that we can impact many different things, or as many things as we can. To put $200,000 or $300,000 into this fund right off the bat like that, I wasn't comfortable with. So I argued for, I suggested $100,000, and the board went with that. We'll move it in there. Now I think Mike Schwartzer and the department heads should really look at what are the retirement dates of people and their probabilities of retiring on that date. If the probability of retiring on that date is 90% or more, and we know those people and we know the dates, we can plan more effectively. I didn't have that information.
Thank you, Mr. Zanoy. Ms. Latimer.
Eileen Latimer. I guess with an article like this, it kind of begs the question, you put this in this year and where does it go from there? And it's a way of dissecting things again. We have a line in the budget that is funded that you do put numbers into for this particular item.
Yep.
Thank you, Jerry, for agreeing to that. And I think it is incumbent upon the department heads to do as good a job as they can. I mean, albeit there are people who decide within a year to retire, but for the most part, the planning is done the year before, if you know when you're going to retire, for the most part. The $1 million figure that's been thrown out there is a little bit of a panic button. That would be if everybody retired at the same time who was eligible, and that's not going to happen. We saw 1 year that had a big impact, but the others, for the most part, have followed suit with the budget. Of all the things that we have on our plate to look at for this coming year. I don't view this one as a critical one. I feel the appropriate place for this is in the budget. If the department heads do their work and review their workforces and come up with a head count for what they have going on in the coming year for those who will be retiring, and that figure is put into the budget, I don't see a reason for a separate warrant article. That will probably, as others have, had a life of its own and become part of this overload that we have of warrant articles that go from year to year to year. And one of the things I don't like to hear is this moving around. This has a specific purpose. It has a specific line already in the budget. We don't need to give it two. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Latimer. We've heard from this board, we've heard from the audience. I'm going to move on to Article 21. And with that, we are 20 down and 21 to go. If you were to spend 10 minutes apiece on the remaining 21 articles, that would be another 3.5 hours. That would take us to 6:45. I've always felt that we do not do our best work after 5 o'clock in the evening. So with that task ahead of 21 articles, and merely by spending 10 minutes on each article, it would be 3.5 hours. I ask everyone keep that in mind, and knowing that the final word comes not today, but on March 13th. Article 21, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $15,450 generated from the sale of town-owned cemetery lots and to authorize the transfer of such sum to the Cemetery Burial Trust Fund. The interest from this fund is withdrawn annually and deposited in the town's general fund as an offset to the amount appropriated in the operating budget for the maintenance of cemeteries. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, 5-0. Recommended by the Budget Committee, 14-0. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 21? Moved by Mr. Griffin, seconded by Mr. Lally. Mr. Griffin, do you have anything to add on Article 21?
I just want to say that our people at the cemetery committee, they do a great job, and I think that we should go with this. People should support this article.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 21? Seeing none, Article 21 will appear as printed. Article 22, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $90,000 from revenues generated from the Police Forfeiture Fund, a special revenue fund created by Article 55 of the 2003 annual town meeting to carry out all lawful functions allowed under federal, state, and local criminal justice forfeiture programs. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, 5-0. Recommended by the Budget Committee. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 22? Moved by Mr. Lally, seconded by Mr. Griffin. Mr. Lally, do you wish to speak to Article 22?
No, sir, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's an article that's been on for several years, and it's basic housekeeping at the police department.
Thank you, Mr. Lally. Anybody else wishing to be heard on 22? Article 22 will appear as printed on the ballot. Article 23, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $100,000 from revenues generated from the Hampton TV Origination Fund, a special revenue fund created under Article 21 of the 2000 annual town meeting and funded by revenues generated from the Cable TV Local Origination Franchise Agreement Fund to upgrade, expand, and enhance the development, of the local origination channels. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, 5-0. Recommended by the Budget Committee, 14-0. Is there a motion to open Article 23 for discussion? Moved by Mr. Pluff, seconded by Mr. Griffin. Mr. St. Pierre, do you wish to speak to Article 23?
Once again, at St. Pierre Ocean Boulevard. Just here for the cable board to remind the people that there is no tax impact to this warrant article. The standard way that we operate is the money is appropriated to us so we can fund the TV. It is not coming out of taxpayer money. It comes from the franchise fee from Comcast. I believe it is a service to the community. Certainly without Channel 22, we wouldn't have any record of the meetings other than minutes. We wouldn't have online meetings to view as you do now. And a no vote on this would essentially turn the switch off of Channel 22, and I think that would be a disservice to this community. So I urge everyone to vote in favor of this article. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. St. Pierre. Mr. Pierce, do you wish to be heard
Yes, I'd like to,
on 23?
no, not on 23, as soon as you finish, sir.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 23? Seeing none, Article 23 will appear on the ballot as printed.
I'd like to move to restrict reconsideration on 20, 21, 22, and 23.
There's motion to restrict reconsideration on Articles 20 through 23. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Lally. All in favor, raise your voter card. Down cards.
Mr.
All
Moderator.
opposed. Articles 20 through 23 are restricted.
Mr. Moderator, I don't think we restricted 19 and 20, and I'd like to make that motion as well.
But we just did 20, and
Okay, good. And 19 then.
19.
Did we vote to restrict that one? I don't remember. Restricted for reconsideration.
We did
We
19,
did? Okay,
so
good.
we're restricted through 23. Article 24, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $78,000 for the purpose of replacing storage sheds at Tuckfield and Eaton Park, as well as planning for the remodeling of existing facilities at Tuckfield for use as Recreation Department offices, work and meeting areas as determined by the Board of Selectmen, Town Manager, the Director of Public Works, and the Director of Recreation and Parks, and to fund said appropriation by transferring $78,000 from the Hampton Recreation Infrastructure Special Revenue Fund established under Article 44 of the 2007 Annual Town Meeting, and no amount to be raised by taxation. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, 5-0. Recommended by the Budget Committee. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 24? Moved by Mr. Lally, seconded by Mr. Pierce. Mr. Lally, do you wish to speak to Article 24?
Yes, once again, Mr. Moderator, pretty self-explanatory. The Director of Parks and Recreation is here to speak on this, but basically it is what it is. It's to upgrade the area of Tuckfield, including the sheds that as you pull into Tuckfield on the left, there's some sheds there that are just about falling down, need a repair, and I hope we'll get this passed.
Thank you, Mr. Lally. Ms. Martin, would you like to speak to Article 24?
Good afternoon. I'm Diana Martin, and I'm the Parks and Recreation Director here for the town of Hampton. And I would just reiterate what Bill said. This article was written for the purpose of making some improvements to Tuckfield. And if you do go down to the field, you'll see, I don't know if you can see this on TV or not, but the sheds that we're hoping to replace are red and white sheds down there. In my opinion, they're probably as old as dirt, but they're ready to fall down. So we'd like to replace those with garages that will hold all of our equipment. We have a lot of expensive equipment right now that's sitting outside that really should be housed in a facility. So we're hoping that this article will pass on that. The other part of the article states that we would like to use whatever money's left as an exploratory, to have exploratory plans to see if we could add our department office facilities as well as meeting rooms and recreational rooms for the public. And again, the only thing I would like to add is that this, thanks to the warrant article from 2007 that was passed, this work will be completed without money being raised by taxation. So I'm hoping everybody will support us on that.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Is there anyone wishing to be heard on Article 24? Mr. Moody?
Art Moody, so it sounds like you're going to move the offices out of the central office, town office, down there. And I imagine their vehicles, the bus and the dump truck and the pickup, will they be parked down there overnight and everything? It seems like an isolated spot to put expensive vehicles.
Ms. Martin, would you like to address Mr. Moody's question?
Yes, we're exploring the opportunity of having our offices down there, and yes, our bus and everything else will go down to that area, but we are hoping that we can find some type of garage that will house most of all of our equipment, including the trucks.
Thank you. Anyone else on Article 24? Seeing none, we'll move on to Article 25. And I would entertain a motion to waive the reading of Article 25 in its entirety due to its length.
Make that motion.
Moved by Mr. Lassard, seconded by Mr. Moody. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 25? Moved by Mr. Zanoy. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Pierce. Mr. Zanoy, do you wish to speak to Article 25?
Yeah, it's the same as last year, except we dropped $7,500 from a hospice, that Seacoast Hospice, which I understand is no longer nonprofit, from Fred anyway. And so it's the same as last year, but it's down $7,500.
Anyone else wishing to be heard on Article 25? Seeing none, Article 25 will appear on the ballot as printed. We have to take another break for just a minute or two for Channel 22 to change a disc. So we will take if everybody could stay put, it'll be about 2 or 3 minutes, and we'll be back on at Article 26. I can't hear you. Are we good right now? All right. I've been told we can keep going, so we'll keep moving on. And I have a motion to restrict reconsideration on Articles 24 and 25. Moved by Mr. Lassard, seconded by Mr. Nichols. All those in favor, raise your voter card, down card. All those opposed. Articles 24 and 25 have been restricted from further consideration of this meeting. Article 26, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $43,000 for the purpose of providing full larviciding of mosquito breeding areas in the town, including catch basins, and for spraying of adult mosquitoes during the months of June through September 2012. But if the operating budget for article for 2012 passes, then this article shall not be deemed to authorize a duplicate amount of expenditures. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen 5-0. Not recommended by the Budget Committee 8-7. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 26? Moved by Mr. Griffin, seconded by Mr. Lally. Mr. Griffin.
I'm prepared to offer an amendment.
All right. This is, again, an article that I understand was flagged by the Department of Revenue Administration relative to the wording. And the Department of Revenue Administration has advised that the language needs to be conformed such that it would read, if the amendment is approved, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $43,000 for the purpose of providing full larviciding of mosquito breeding areas in the town of Hampton, including catch basins, and for spraying of adult mosquitoes during the months of June through September 2012. But if the operating budget, Article 11 in this warrant, passes, then this Article 26 is null and void. Do I have a second to Mr. Griffin's amendment? Seconded by Mr. Lally. Mr. Griffin, do you wish to speak to the article, the amendment?
I believe that Mr. Swotzer is prepared to speak on this.
Okay. Ms. Geiser, if we could have some words from the Finance Director, and then I'll get to you.
If you go back to Article 11, which is the budget, there was some additional information put in by the DRA, which reflected that if the budget passed, then you would not have Article 26 and actually 27, the next one, coming through. This is the mirror part of it. This is where it says that if the budget passes, then these dollars are no longer needed and it will be null and void, so we're not double appropriating. This is strictly to protect ourselves so that if, in the event of a default is voted, then we do have the monies that we need to take care of these two projects.
Mr. Moderator, may I
Mr.
just
Yeah.
add that I urge everyone to vote for this. Mrs. Kaiser does a wonderful job here, and she's got a full support of the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Ms. Kaiser, would you like to speak to the amendment?
Yes, this is one that I come before you with every year. Started with the default budgets. If this gets into the operating budget this year passes, then we won't have to have this warrant article again. This is more of an insurance article. It was not recommended by the Budget Committee simply because they did not want to have this as an additional warrant article. They felt it should be in the operating budget where it should be. But again, as Mr. Schwartz has said, he said everything, so I really don't need to burden you with any more. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Geiser. Ms. Latimer?
Not being redundant, but clearly the Budget Committee is for this article and the one after this one. We did pledge ourselves this year to try to unite a couple of warrant articles into the budget that appear to pass every year no matter what. And this is one of them that no matter what, no matter how many times we put it on, it's passed, it belongs in the budget, it is in the budget. That lower budget figure that you saw does include this as well as the mounted patrol. So it'll be, I don't have to come up here twice and talk about that. But you should know that the Budget Committee does fully support the expenses incurred with mosquito control and mounted patrol for that matter as well. We just think this is an effort to reunite it in the budget and not have all these other warrant articles on the side to confuse things. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Latimer. Let's take a vote on the Pierce Amendment. All those in favor of the Pierce Amendment, which adopts the language... Griffin, excuse me. All those in favor of the Griffin Amendment, which incorporates the language requested by the Department of Revenue Administration, if you could raise your voter card. Down cards. All opposed. I declare that the Griffin Amendment has passed. Seeing no one else to speak on the article, Article 26 will appear on the ballot as amended. Article 27, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $33,511 to fund the operations of the Police Department Mounted Patrol Unit. Such funds to include but not be limited to the care and maintenance of the horses, training, wages, benefits, and outfitting of the riders, the cost of transporting horses and riders, and other such costs necessary or desirable to the operation of the Mounted Patrol Unit. But if the operating budget article for 2012 passes, then this article shall not be deemed to authorize a duplicate amount of expenditures. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen, 5-0. Not recommended by the Budget Committee, 8-6. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 27? Moved by Mr. Griffin, seconded by Mr. Pierce. Mr. Griffin, would you like to speak to Article 27?
This is something that we have, the public has voiced their support for many times in the past, and I'd like to just make known that we have full support of the Mounted Patrol.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin.
And we have an amendment also to offer.
So Mr. Griffin has offered an amendment to Article 27, which I understand, again, originates from the Department of Revenue Administration, such that Article 27, as amended, would read, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $33,511 to fund the operations of the Police Department Mounted Patrol Unit, such funds to include but not limited to the care and maintenance of the horses, training, wages, benefits, and outfitting of the riders, the cost of transporting horses and riders, and other such costs necessary, desirable to the operation of the Mounted Patrol Unit. But if the operating budget, Article 11, in this article passes, then Article 27 is null and void. Do I have a second to Mr. Griffin's amendment? Seconded by Mr. Zanoy. Is there any discussion of the article as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor of the Griffin amendment to Article 27, down cards. All opposed. The Griffin amendment passes. Article 27 will appear on the ballot as amended. Article 28, shall the town of Hampton vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $145,000 for continued improvements to the town's drainage management systems as planned for Cogger Street, Tuck Road, Belmont Circle, Fairfield Drive, Ruth Lane, Moulton Road, Kings Highway, and updating drainage plans and mapping for all town streets and roads. Majority vote required. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen 5-0, not recommended by the Budget Committee 11 to 2 to 1. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 28? Moved by Mr. Pierce, seconded by Mr. Lally. Mr. Pierce, would you like to speak to Article 28?
Yes, I would. I think I said earlier that I took a tour of everything, walked all over the place, walked through the woods all the way from Barber Road all the way to the pond, all over the town. I just really got a really backyard view of everybody's property and their drainage. And I have no problem personally with this moving along, because even though some people seem to think we're got them listed twice and so forth and there's an awful lot of money, that's not true, because as we all know, and that person who was criticizing that earlier probably knows better than anybody else, we had a little stall in Public Works this last year, and that person should be totally familiar with that. So therefore, based on that alone, I recommend this to all of you and to the voters, because, as I said before, if you don't have a drainage problem on your property, your neighbor probably does.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Ms. Lammers. Mr. Noyes.
Hopefully one more time. As I mentioned previously, our department has been developing a road improvement plan that includes stormwater drainage improvements. We have a number of drainage improvement plans planned for this year as outlined on the plan. This plan includes developing an accurate set of drainage system maps. Once these maps are produced, we will use them to develop a long-term plan for necessary improvements. The particular roads that we have for plans for drainage this year is the Carter Street Pump Station, some drainage improvements on Tuck Road, Belmont Circle, Fairfield Drive, Moulton Road, and Kings Highway. And that's it. If anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Noyes. Ms. Lammers.
Hello, my name is Rosemary Lammers. I live at 155 Woodland Road here in Hampton. And I wanted to rise to speak to this article because it's the third today that I'm hearing about both sewer and drainage issues. And I think it's not an unknown fact that I've long since been a supporter of people in need of their sewer and drainage issues. However, I am concerned where I see three different articles, and I see in particular some of the same roads being addressed. In terms of a master plan, in Article 6, we looked at the possibility of drainage plans along the railroad tracks as a future possibility. Some of these roads, it seems to me, may in fact tie into that. Conversely, on 18, we looked at specific roads that were looking at drainage and sewer as well. And here again on Article 28. And my concern here is particular to a situation that I had heard some of the drainage plans that were going on for some of these roads. And that is, it was simply to open up older drains that may have been 50-plus years old and clogged. However, there's been a tremendous amount of development since that time. And opening up those drains may in fact cause drainage issues elsewhere. For instance, I understand that some of those roads, the intent was to open up old drains on Mill Road, and the issue is once they're opened up, are they heading down White's Lane, and what's after that? Well, that happens to be Woodland Road where I live. What's the plan for the water once you've opened up the drain in terms of a master plan? Are we shifting it from one part of the town to another? And I'm just looking at that as extremely problematic with some intent that somehow it meanders its way down to, say, Bear Swamp and across the road and then ultimately down to High Street. It seems to me that with three different warrant articles and the potential for solutions down the road with the railroad station, that I would personally like to see a better master plan tying all this in before we start opening up drains and doing a little bit here and a little bit there that then becomes a problem in other neighborhoods like my own. So I'm certainly in favor of addressing all these issues, but I'd like to see at least expressed to the public a comprehensive plan that not only solves one problem, but doesn't create one in another area of town. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lammers. Mr. Noyes, would you like to address Ms. Lammers' comments?
Sure. As I mentioned previously, we have money in the budget. Actually, it's $50,000 to look at the whole drainage system. What I've found since I've been here, there was a large-scale drainage plan done a number of years ago. It was more of a cursory look at the town, just from a federal standpoint, for the federal flood maps. But now what we want to do is go in those specific areas and actually perform a survey that shows the elevations of all the inverts of the pipes. We don't have that right now. All we have is a mishmash of plans, a bunch of separate plans that show just where the lines are in catch basins. They have no elevations on them. And once we go out and survey the storm drain, and we're going to do the sewer system at the same time, we'll be able to come up with an accurate set of plans and really be able to come up with a long-term drainage improvement plan for the town. So the works are in place to do just what the lady was talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Noyes. Mr. Lasire.
This is one of my favorites. 1955, Boston Main Railroad told Hampton to get their pipes out of their property and not to put them back. I think I gave the town manager the paper. In the meantime, we bought it. We bought that. That land that goes from Exeter Road to Northampton, almost Northampton. In 1954, they got permission. Bobby Moriarty's house on Moore Avenue, it caved in the foundation from being flooded. What happened was Phil Howe and his crew built Cogger Avenue, and they built some of them, and they put the water down there. And then Stan Brown, who was a handshake, it was a handshake. That's why I looked and I said, there's no more boards with handshakes. And he told them that they could they went down to the depot. He said they could take the water from Hackett Lane, Moore Avenue, run it down, go right down Route 1, go behind the old Ford garage, tie into his sewer. But Stan says, well, what am I going to do about my roadway? And I just put a new sidewalk in here. What are we going to do about this? He said, and it was Walter Vanderpool, Frank Fitzgerald, and it was, I forget now if it was, it was another selectman there, and Walter Vanderpool, but that doesn't matter. They all said, look, you're through, they just put a new sidewalk in, you're through putting the sidewalks in, Stan. We're going to take care of this square. We're going to take care of your roadway here and the sidewalks if you give us the permission to hook into the sewer. Well, Stan Brown, a handshake. The good old days, the handshake, not like today, because handshakes, people don't know about it. I think only the monkeys shake hands now, agree with each other. But anyways, and I'm being facetious. But what happens, we get flooded. They got, when John Handgun was here, they pumped the sewage across the street into, when we fixed Route 1, there was, they put it in that line, and it went out back and flooded us. And your attorney is right here today. When I told him I was going to sue the town of Hampton, I told the town I was going to sue him if I got flooded again. Well, they sure flooded me. One day during the summer, one of the selectmen saw me up to Mitchell's and said, give me 30 days, Vic, 30 days and I'll have the answer for you. Well, you know who fixed the railroad? My sons and myself took and fixed the pipe where the town of Hampton dumped the water in. And there's no handshakes over there. But I will tell you, a lot of these people need this. I think it was John Nickerson's house I went over. They wanted to put a trench in. My God, that trench was that deep and left open for quite a while. I think some of the people that say they're going to do something should do it. So then I was told, you better get a good lawyer. Well, I got a lawyer that offered to take the case for nothing for me. But I figured, why am I going to sue the town of Hampton? I came in with the tide, like I said earlier. My family been here since the 20s, 21, this first market. And every one of them has given something to this town. But I'm going to tell you something. If you get that, you get it in writing if they're going to go through your land and have it checked. Fred knows who fixed that pipeline down there. I fixed it. Stan Brown, we're plowing his road because Stan Brown, they wanted to make a fire lane out of it. Well, you know, this is what upsets people in the town of Hampton. Now, I know somebody's going to come back behind me and say, you know, we've given them money. But you know something? You got to maintain what you got. And I think these people, that water's going on their property, it should be taken off by the town. The only thing, I'm lucky I got the equipment to do it. But now I see the town's thinking about buying that land. Well, I missed that part of the meeting today purposely, because I even thought about buying it with a group of people. But I hear they wanted to put a pipe down through there now, if they get that. But I'm going to tell you, right now, I'd rather see now these other streets fixed than ours right now, because we've got it. We work with the railroad, and we actually put 3 days, and the town of Hampton gave some stuff. The last Public Works Director hauled stuff up that it looked a little bit rough. I think if I dumped it, I would be digging it out now, but that's beside the point. So it's, what I say right now is, I'm for this article, and I'm for drainage. If you moved into a house and people drain water into you, they're supposed to get it out of there. So I think we've got to do this, and I don't think a stranger that moves into town, if they flood his house or her place, they're not going to sue the town. I'm worried about a lawsuit there, and I'm for this, for the money we're going to spend. So I hope you vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lassard. Ms. Latimer?
Got an ambitious year ahead of us, and we have a lot of DPW articles as warrants going out there. We have, if you have a copy of your budget, there is $145,000 in drainage construction on that, or in that budget, the one that's being presented to you to be voted on this year. With that being said, the Budget Committee disagreed with the need of another $145,000 article as a warrant. I mean, clearly, there's only so much we can accomplish correctly in a given year. You heard Mr. Noy saying that he has $50,000 to do some of the planning work, the engineering work. I think that we can get a good start with the $145,000 in the budget, and we don't need this additional $145,000 in a warrant article. In the future, if we need more for these projects, I would like to see it in the budget.
Thank you, Ms. Latimer. Mr. Trainer. Ms. Woolsey, are you in line? Okay. Mr. Trainer, and then we're going to get a sense of where we are in this article.
Peter Trainer, Presidential Circle. The $145,000 that's already in the budget, there was $145,000 last year. They started some of this project, and they found out the elevations are, one's higher than the other, they're going to need a pump. They stopped the project. I would have thought if you start from point A and you go to point D, you put a string or a laser and you find out if you have any high spots, and you compensate them before you start. I would say I'm against 145,000 additional money in this article. I would say to take the money that's already in the budget and finish the projects that you started last year before you jump from A to D to from here to there, different sides of the town. If you start a project, finish it, but take a good look at what you have to begin with before you start it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainer. Are we all set on Article 28? All those in favor of closing discussion on 28, you raise your voter card. Down card. All opposed. Article 28 will appear on the ballot as printed. Article 29.
I'd like to move to restrict reconsideration of 26, 27, and 28.
Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Mr. Lally. All those in favor of restricting Articles 26, 27, and 28 from further discussion, raise your card. Down card. All opposed. Articles 26 through 28 are restricted from further consideration of this meeting. Article 29, shall the town of Hampton vote to confirm the acceptance of the following named streets without any payment of damages that had previously been accepted by the Board of Selectmen on the date shown, have been maintained by the town since the Selectmen's acceptance, and by administrative oversight were not brought before a town meeting for an acceptance vote. Johnson Avenue, August 13, 1971. Shirley Terrace, May 21, 1973. Bon Air Avenue, May 21, 1973. Genesian Road, July 2, 1973. Sunset Lane, now Page Lane, on July 2, 1973. Whitten Street, July 16, 1973. Dustin Avenue, July 16, 1973. Mill Pond Lane, March 4, 1974. Glen Road, March 4, 1974. Fox Road, March 4, 1974. Bittersweet Lane, March 18, 1974. Beach Bum Way from tax map 134, lot 38 to lot 97, April 29, 1974. Sanborn Road, May 27, 1974. Gill Street, August 23, 1976. Jones Avenue, April 26, 1977. Presidential Circle, August 14, 1978. Holly Lane, February 11, 1980. Ross Avenue, February 28, 1980. Stickney Terrace, June 2, 1981. Willow Lane, September 8, 1981. Francine Street, September 28, 1992. Bruce Street, September 28, 1992. Patricia Street, September 28, 1992. Falcone Circle, February 10, 1992. Majority vote required. Is there a motion to open discussion on Article 29? Moved by Mr. Lally. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Griffin. Mr. Lally, would you like to speak to Article 29?
Yes, basically just clearing up official records of the town. These were oversights. They weren't brought to town meeting vote in these years, which they were passed by former selectmen. So it's basically just a housekeeping issue.
Thank you, Mr. Lally. Mr. Moody, would you like to speak to Article 29?
Art Moody. You'd think, like the next article, there's actually an RSA reference to why you have to do something. The only thing I could find was the 674, 41, and 40, which says that if this has to go to town meeting, then that's the land use law. And it says that the planning board has to look at these first, which they haven't. And the planning board says, okay, it's a majority vote. If they say no, it's a two-thirds vote. However, you've got about 25 roads here and one yes, no vote. That probably is the tops. The tops, even the welfare agencies. There's only 20, is it? Just looking at this last night, I find like Johnson Avenue, it was on last year's article that passed, Article 29. Why is it repeated? 39, Article 39. This is Article 29. Dustin Avenue, DUSTIN, it assesses addresses for those 40, 50 condos, and the town published map spell it DUSTON. When you vote to accept the road, I guess you should spell it the way you're using it. Sunset Lane, now Page Lane. Is this, okay, Page Lane. Page Lane goes across Brown Avenue to the west, hence Sunset, and to the east. Now, back in some year, 1953, Article 26, annual town meeting, we accepted Sunset Road, not Sunset Lane, but it was the west side. Is this just the east side? Is this the west side and the east side? Is it just the east side?
Does anyone on the board wish to address Mr. Moody's question about
Because
Sunset
the
Lane?
east side is a private road, and we shouldn't have that in this article. No answer. Ross Avenue. It was approved by an annual town meeting, March 10th, 1953, Article 26. And 2.5 weeks later by the Board of Selectmen. Maybe that Sunset is not 53. Maybe it's 54. I can tell you, 54, March 9th, 54, Article 39. So we don't know whether we're accepting a private road here or not on Page Lane, east side of Brown Avenue. The last thing, and I don't, as Mary Louise would say, I don't lard up the annual warrant with stuff like this. I'd like to know, well, the first time we've had on one of these legal outfit package deals is Beach Plum Way. Now, we have about 50 roads, none of which have been to town meeting for approval, that were built by the selectmen under their proprietary private duties as managers of town leased land for private use. Town meeting from 1880 on gave them authority to do whatever is necessary, create these lots to be leased and presumably used just in the summer, and we tax the building. And Beach Plum Way was probably the last one created in the 1970s to provide access in Place Cove to house lots that had no road on the beach because it washed away many decades before. 10 foot wide mostly, less in areas. Now, it was all town land. All these 50 roads were on town-owned land to begin with, before a lot of these laws even existed. Just like my Ashworth Avenue was built by the town, which had leased land on one side. I would, the description, you'll notice there's no date. Well, there is a date, 1974. I was present. Selectman Helen Hayden named that road. Now, the tax map and lot numbers here are not inclusive of Beach Plum Way. They don't include all of Beach Plum Way. That lot 97 should be lot 99, and an additional tax map of 152, lot 8. To the north end of Beach Plum Way, there are 4 lots that aren't included here, which are, just so it'll be on the record, tax map 134, lot 24, 25, 30, 31. Lot 25 is the first house. Well, I can't say that. Yeah, I guess I could. It's next to Northside Park, named in honor of Joseph Ballard Brown, a selectman in the early 1900s. And I think it's lot number 25 is 60 Beach Plum Way. Because a doctor named Moody built it. I happen to know that. So I'd just like to point out, if we have to do this, I don't know why we have to do this. Especially on the leased land with 48 more roads to come.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. Any further comment? Any discussion, Mr. Welch, on?
Mr. Moderator, the reason this article is here is because the selectmen on various dates moved to accept certain streets and ways to be public highways in accordance with the statutes in RSA 231. As a matter of fact, we had to convert the old lot designations for Beach Plum Way, for instance. On 4/29/74, they made a motion and passed a motion from the Board of Selectmen to accept Beach Plum Way and to name it that, from lot 534 to lot 512. The statutes do not favor the Selectmen's acceptance of roads as public highways until the legislature saw fit to do that in 1993. This town accepted that law in 1994. These roads all pre-existed that. They're all actions taken by the Board of Selectmen. They've all been reviewed, and we are certain that they have all been accepted, or the Selectmen attempted to accept them as public highways. They're just not legally that currently. We want to make sure that should some problem arise in the future, that in fact we carry out the wishes of prior boards of selectmen to make these public highways. That's why the article is here, and we still have, I believe, 8 or 9 years worth of selectmen's records to read in order to find the remainder of the ones that they have accepted. They're not legally accepted until this body acts on it by state statute. And that statute goes back to the 1800s or earlier. So that's the reason it's here, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. Seeing nothing further, no one further on Article 29. Article 29 will appear on the ballot as printed. Article 30, shall the town of Hampton vote to adopt the following ordinance for the disposal of town property? Disposal of surplus town equipment and materials ordinance. Authority, in accordance with the provisions of New Hampshire RSA Chapter 31, Section 3, and Chapter 31, Section 39, Roman 1, Subpart 1, authorizing the town of Hampton to enact bylaws, the following ordinance for the disposal of non-real estate and financial asset property is adopted for the town of Hampton by its annual town meeting assembled. Purpose: it is the declared purpose of the town of Hampton through the adoption of this ordinance to regulate the disposition of its non-real estate property by establishing a uniform method of disposal that will protect the public interest, secure its assets, and ensure accountability. Section 1, exclusions. Excluded from this ordinance is the disposal of town-owned real estate that shall be disposed of in accordance with existing laws, the disposal of any financial assets retained by insurance carriers, the result of an insurance settlement, and the disposal of materials that have no resale value as defined herein. Section 2, property of no resale value, materials that have no value by virtue of its destruction, its inability to be used for the purpose for which it was designed, or materials that have no or extremely low value are excluded from this ordinance. Such property shall be designated in writing that it has no value and verified by at least 2 town officials before its disposal. Section 3, all property not otherwise excluded from this ordinance shall be sold only by sealed bid or by public auction at such times and under such conditions as the selectmen shall direct. Section 4, effective this ordinance shall take effect at time of its passage. Do I have a motion to open discussion on Article 30? Moved by Mr. Zanoy. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Pierce. Mr. Zanoy, would you like to address Article 30?
I think it's self-explanatory, and I think you've done a good job in reading it, so it's pretty clear
Okay.
to me.
Seeing no one to speak on the article, Do I have anyone who wants to speak on it? No. Article 30 will appear on the ballot as printed. I didn't. Yep, we're going to move on to Article 31.
Always a grave omission here.
Article 31, should the Board of Selectmen enter into a memorandum of understanding or any other agreement that will obligate the town of Hampton to maintain, repair, construct, and reconstruct the sidewalks on State Department of Transportation property along Route 1A, Ocean Boulevard at the town's expense? Do I have a motion to open discussion on Article 31? Moved by Mr. Griffin, seconded by Mr. Lally. Mr. Griffin has an amendment.
As an amendment.
I'm going to read the entire amendment, which encompasses the article, so I'll start from the beginning of the article. Mr. Griffin's amendment would have the article read, should the Board of Selectmen enter into a memorandum of understanding or any other agreement that will obligate the town of Hampton to maintain or repair the sidewalks on State Department of Transportation property along Route 1A, Ocean Boulevard, between Haverhill Street and Ashworth Avenue at the town's expense, so long as the State Department of Transportation newly constructs and/or reconstructs those same sidewalks at their expense or is paid by non-town capital funds, which New Hampshire DOT would partner with the community in obtaining through different federal/state funding sources. Is that your amendment, Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Do I have a second on the Griffin amendment? Seconded by Mr. Zanoy. Mr. Griffin, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Did you want to speak, John?
Do you yield to Mr. Nyan?
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin, for entering in this amendment on my behalf. Let me be short, because as every time I keep on coming up here, I see less and less people in the audience, and I want to make sure that we have enough cards to do a vote. When I read this warrant article, it didn't give me a warm fuzzy of everything that I know that I have been involved in since last May. Being, once again, representing the Hampton Beach Area Commission, which, by the way, part of our mission is to advise and counsel local, region, and state government on matters that have an impact on the master plan at Hampton Beach. In this area, I have been involved both directly and indirectly with working with the Board of Selectmen, the town manager, and the Department of Transportation here in New Hampshire. And there has been a fair amount of discussions around sidewalks and sidewalks around Ocean Boulevard. The reason for this amendment, ladies and gentlemen, is that it is, in my opinion, and the opinion of being involved in this from the very beginning, that the words that were used in this original warrant was incorrect, and I refer to the words construct and reconstruct. It has been my impression from the very beginning, since last May, when we were talking about the A block, the block down at the beach that was destroyed by fire. That was the sidewalk that was initially discussed. And then during the summer, as some of you might know, we had applied for federal funds, which we did not get, but we had applied for federal funds to redo Ocean Boulevard, which would include a redoing of the street, sidewalks, and drainage. That would have been from federal money. During that activity, the Department of Transportation assisted us in searching and getting to those funds. So one of the clear things I think we need to make sure that if this goes out as an advisory warrant article to the residents of Hampton, that the agreement would be, or the understanding would be, that the town would be obligated to maintain and repair, not to construct or reconstruct, the sidewalks on State Department of Transportation property along Route 1. And we're talking right now, at least it's my impression and idea of the conversations once again that I've had with the town and Department of Transportation. Right now, we're talking about Ocean Boulevard from Haverhill Street to Ashworth Avenue. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about any other part And we're also talking about the sidewalk on the west side of Ocean Boulevard. We are not talking about the sidewalk that is owned by Dred on the east side of Ocean Boulevard. It's important that people understand that if we are to complete some of our initiatives down at the beach and to follow our recommendations made by the master plan, that we continue to work in cooperation with not only the town, the region, but also the state and all state agencies and also the federal government. It is my opinion that we, in this particular case, need to continue to sit at the table with the Department of Transportation, come up with some type of memorandum of understanding that both parties are pleased with working together. I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, in my direct efforts of working with the Department of Transportation, they have been a godsend to this community with regard to putting us in front of possible federal grants. We all know that we don't have any money for capital improvements the size that we need to improve Hampton Beach. The state has come up with right now $14.5 million to do the east side. So all I'm asking is that this amendment be approved. I'm appealing to the people that are still here at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm appealing to you all that this amendment clarifies and I think would give the voters out there that are not here today a better understanding of what this memorandum of understanding would be. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Nye. Mr. Lassard.
Now, what's this article going to say? We're going to maintain them? Do I understand that we're going to maintain these sidewalks now on the west side? Am I right? Am I correct?
What the article is asking, it is not stating that we're going to do anything. It's advisory only in nature, and it's asking for the input from the citizens of Hampton as to whether or not the Board of Selectmen should take that on.
I know there's a lot of people who were raised here, born here, and the whole works. And I've already spoke on this before. And to speak on this and do it justice, I got to bring some history in. 1932, the town of Hampton voted not to give this land to the beach. I'd give it to the state. They turned it down. In 33, the state of New Hampshire came back and they re-voted. They said, look, we will take the beach. You give us the whole thing. We'll take care of you from this lot line right here, east. That included the sidewalk in the east and the sidewalk in the west. Now, the thing about it is that bothers me on this. One of the old timers in Hampton, Homer Johnson, said there'll be a day when they'll renege on this. They're going to try to get out of it. Now, I'm not saying the state's trying to get out of it. I'm just saying we should make 4 or 5 departments in the town of Hampton and say, well, transportation don't have that no more. Dred does it. But Hampton Beach Improvement owned where you people maybe gone down the beach and saw a green line. Did everybody see a green line a few years back painted on the sidewalk? How many of you saw that? All right. That's where the town, 99-year lease to the Hampton Beach Improvement, that was their project. Well, Batchelor himself and that group took care of some of the construction. Then it went on and Homer Johnson took it over. Well, Homer came to me one day and he says, jump in, we're going to go up to Batchelor's. And we took it over from that day on. For me to be able to do anything, we took care of strictly the roads, not the sidewalks. Not the sidewalks. We weren't allowed to touch a sidewalk up in the ocean front without their permission. And when we got their permission, the people paid for it. But if you notice, the A block had hot top up there. The rest of them had concrete. Well, we took care of the Hampton Beach improvement, and we had a problem one night, real bad problem. And Cronin was, I think, the state guy, and he was tough as nails. We had a drain pipe not working, and it ran down A Street and went in the club down the end. And there was a plug on the floor, and it blew the plug out. People were sitting at that table, they were playing a game. I went up and I told them they got to fix that. Well, they didn't fix it. So what we did, with the Hampton Beach Improvements permission, we went up and we put a hump up there on A Street. When the water come down, it ran down the ocean front. I think if you go down, it still runs down there. I don't think they changed it because they had to fix the catch basin. Well, anyways, they they would not fix them. If you go up, keep going right up. They asked us, the town of Hampton back in the, I don't know if you were on the board there, Mary Louise, they wanted to put a drain pipe over into the road going out to Toby, what's it, Johnson, the old place, on the ocean front of North Shore. Yeah, Place Cove, but it's a name for that road. They said, could we drain in there? Ancient Highway. Could we put a drain going over the Ancient Highway? Well, you know who owns that drain now, don't you? They dumped it right back on us. I got to tell you right now, you people have been talking about money here. Do you realize what this is going to cost if we get caught and we have to maintain these? I mean, I don't know what they promised people, but Pawtucket State Park, they said they don't do any more sidewalks. May I ask the manager a question why I'm doing this?
If it's on this.
It's strictly on this.
Okay, okay.
Didn't he say they don't do sidewalks anymore at that meeting?
The Commissioner of Transportation said the state does not maintain any sidewalks on state highways except for the sidewalk on the Memorial Bridge.
Yeah. And they did, and I brought up Pawtucket State Park,
Yes.
and he says, oh, it's dread. Well, let's face it, Public Works, if they needed trucks to fight a fire department, and the Public Works had one of the trucks, are we going to say, no, we're not going to do that? No, we send a truck. And I think, as far as I'm concerned, if they want us to take over the sidewalks at Hampton Beach, sign the whole beach back to us, and we'll take care of it. And that's the only way. And if people start giving away money, and we've already gave the beach away, and at the time, they were supposed to do seawalls, sidewalks, and roads, and they got the parking. And a matter of fact, I think, I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure they're not supposed to put concessions on that side either, in on the deal. So I think if you people really and truly love this town, you want to stay here, and I see you cut 146,000. I tried to cut 146,000 out a little while ago on drains that are going to try to clean up people's yards. Wait till you get the bill on this one. Next, they won't want to paint the crosswalks. Then they're not going to, I'm going to tell you something, this is a disturbing, and I think this could be a real case. No, I mean, go from there, but I'm against doing, promising anything. And as far as the A block, I went up and got the state myself to go up there because people come out of Mitchell's and fell going in from there was such a big hump up there. So I think they should do Mitchell's, and they're lucky they weren't sued. But thank you. But
thank you, Mr. Lasag. What's that? Mr. Noyes.
So what I'd like to say to this is, from what I know, I don't think this is a good idea at all at this point. I don't think we have enough information on what they're asking us to do, what they're planning on doing, improvements. I don't know all that, but what I do know is that if we take over those sidewalks as they are, it's going to increase us manpower needs, all kinds of maintenance needs. We're stressed right out with just trying to maintain what we have. And I'm trying to utilize the resources that we have now to adequately take care of the infrastructure that we have. Taking on this would be a huge burden. And I'm not saying that maybe we couldn't work out some deal with them in the future, but what's on the table right now, and I'm not even a taxpayer in this town, I just tell you, I'd think twice about it, all it's worth.
Do we have an order here, or is this? Go ahead.
Well, mine is simply a parliamentary inquiry.
Okay, Mr. Rainier.
Richard
this
Rainier,
gentleman,
29 Highland Ave.
And Mr. Moody, and then we're going to end the discussion, and we're going to get a sense of the Pierce Amendment. Go ahead, Mr. Rainier.
I have a little problem with the way that this is written, that it says that the should a Board of Selectmen enter into a memorandum of understanding. Is this just saying that you are going to discuss this and not come up with a definitive plan? Mr. Moderator, can I ask the...
Mr. Nichols.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that. I think I responded to a similar question from Vic. Basically, all we are looking for is input from the public, okay? We're not looking for that authority, and my proposal would be that we add to the end of this article is advisory only.
All right, so basically, Mr. Moderator...
We're just looking for a sense of what the public
You're looking for
thinks.
permission to negotiate.
We're not looking for permission, we're looking for a sense of what the public thinks.
All right.
Should we do this or should we not? Purely advisory.
All right, because I would probably like to make an amendment to this.
No, we're working on the Pierce Amendment, and despite what the selectmen have said, I think the tenor of the discussion has been from the last several speakers that they're opposed to it, whether it's advisory, binding, or whatever.
All right, okay.
So I'm not going to entertain a motion to put that type of language on the warrant. We've got the, I believe, was this a selectmen's article, 31? Okay. So that opportunity was there at the outset.
Right.
We have an amendment proposed by a selectman, and that's what we're taking discussion on right now.
All right, Mr. Moderator, I just didn't like the word enter into. I thought it might be negotiate would be a better word, but you say it's advisory only, right? All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to inquire, we're just speaking about the proposed amendment as
Correct.
currently displayed
Yes.
on the board, and I support that amendment, and I'll just restrict myself, and I want to get attention to further amend after this amendment passes.
I need your name and address, sir.
Citizen Jones, 16 Dustin Ave.
I second the motion.
Mr. Moody, and then we're going to get a sense of the Pierce Amendment.
Art Moody, 1933, as Vic said, the state accepted the gift of the land, and they accepted the deed restrictions, which says the state is responsible for their property. They also said no concessions, but we can see they violated that last summer and continue to with the restaurant and so forth. The state law was signed by the governor, and when I was a selectman, the state spent $250,000 on those sidewalks from the state park near the river all the way to the Northampton line. They sent the plans down, they didn't ask us permission if it's town sidewalk. Now the state is saying we have to put in pedestrian lights at each crosswalk, and we have to do the line painting every year. And of course, there's a representative of the Department of Transportation on the state commission, who is a non-resident, of course. There's also a Division of Parks guy there, employees of the state, in other words. So I'd be opposed to this as it is. By the way, it's Haverhill Avenue, it isn't Haverhill Street. This is Haverhill Avenue, Haverhill all the way to Ashworth, near the Ashworth Hotel, Ashcore, as the police officers call it. What about north of the Ashworth, all the way to Great Boar's Head? There's a west side sidewalk there, too.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. All right. We've had discussion on the Pierce Amendment, and that language is highlighted up on the screen. All those in favor of the Pierce Amendment would raise your voter card.
It's actually the Griffin Amendment.
Excuse me. Down cards. All opposed. I'm going to call, I want to make sure we got everybody the first time because it was close. So,
Bob, can I?
no, please. All those in favor of the Griffin Amendment, raise your voter card. Down card. All opposed. Okay, it clearly passed. So the article is amended at the present. Mr. Zanoy?
Yeah, I would want some clarification because John Nyan mentioned west side, and I don't see the word west in there at all.
Well, that was his amendment, and that's where we're going to stay. It's been accepted by it was actually not his amendment. It was Mr. Griffin's amendment, and Mr. Nyan spoke to it.
Will that
as
be
I
open
recall.
if somebody wants to make a...
Now, let's stay where we are. We're using the podium. Sir, go ahead.
I'd like to propose an amendment with the insertion of a word "not" after selectmen. Selectmen not enter.
No, I'm not going to entertain that. We've got some court cases on that topic, so I'm not going to entertain the not amendment.
Then I'll be speaking on the article itself.
Okay, as amended, go ahead.
As amended. I'm opposed to this article. Now, I understand that, and please correct me, I have a question. The selectmen presently have the authority to enter into this negotiation. Is that not correct?
Is there anyone on the Board of Selectmen who can answer that question?
Just my knowledge, yes. Would you like to comment, Mark?
The state of New Hampshire DOT has been, as Vic Lassard mentioned, trying to get the town of Hampton to take over obligations that it assumed back in 1933. I think there's a legal question about that.
So we don't know whether the selectmen presently have the authority.
Well, it depends on what the state is offering. If, for instance, the state were offering to do something for the town that's over and above, that are things that we do now, let's say. In other words, if they were offering to do something for us in return, that would be one thing. If they're just telling us, you've got to do something that we gave away that we took on in 1933, that's something different. It really depends on what the agreement says.
Let me qualify my question a little further.
No,
If this article is passed,
sir,
will it
sir.
further enable the selectmen?
Excuse me. If you'd like to have the privilege of the microphone, you'll follow the instructions that we issued at the beginning of the meeting, which is all questions go through the moderator.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is not a day to have a conversation with Mr.
Moderator,
Gerald.
if I may, through you, ask the question.
Yes, on the article as amended.
On the
Go ahead.
article as amended. If this article passes, will it further empower the selectmen in a way that they're not presently empowered to enter into such an agreement?
Yeah, I'm going to take a stab at this answer, and we've gone over this. I think the board is looking for a sense from the voters as to whether the voters would like the board to enter into these types of discussions. We've heard a lot of discussion here today from folks who don't want that conversation. Does that further empower them? I don't know. You heard Attorney Gerald say that he wasn't sure whether the town had the authority at present to enter it. It would depend on the nature of the conversation. So I believe in listening to Mr. Griffin and others that they intended this article before it was amended, and they support the amendment to get a sense from the townspeople as to whether the townspeople would encourage the selectmen to enter into these discussions with the state.
I see. So since we've got clarity on that, I appreciate that, Mr. Moderator. What we don't have here is any certainty as to what this is going to do. We don't know whether or not they currently have, as I say, the Board of Selectmen currently has the power. The answer from the attorney is, it depends. The standard, always safe answer for any legal question, it depends. Well, I guess my support it depends as well, what agreement you're going to enter into. We don't know. I don't think I want to enter into a blank check, because then, of course, it would depend on whether I had the money to cover it, and that's basically what we're dealing with here on that level. On the secondary level here, we're talking about a potentiality of local funding, that is to say us, paying for maintaining a state asset, which we really don't have any control over. And that just seems to me to be foolish. I'd urge the entire planet to vote no on this.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Sure. Mr. Nyan.
I just need to clarify one thing, Mr. Moderator. Back in May, when the A Street block was being discussed in terms of the responsibility of constructing the sidewalk versus maintaining the sidewalk, the town of Hampton requested DOT to get clarification from the Attorney General's office as the legality of a town having the responsibility to maintain sidewalks that are adjacent to state roads. Department of Transportation did that, and it came back to the town of Hampton under the Attorney General's saying that yes, the town of Hampton had the legal right to maintain sidewalks adjacent to state roads. It will be the opportunity for the town, if they want to challenge that, to go to the court system. But I just wanted to clarify that the Attorney General's office did indicate in a formal finding that the town of Hampton does have the legal right to maintain the sidewalks in question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nyan. Mr. Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'd like to move reconsideration so that I may offer an amendment.
Reconsideration of what?
Of this article right here.
Well, we're in the article
You
right
said that
now.
it was closed. I would like to move that we reconsider the article so that I can offer an amendment which I believe will clarify this, simplify it, and give us an option that we can go forward and at least try to come up with some agreement with the state on how this is done. Right now, we're at an impasse. We've got nothing here.
Mr. Rice, if I suggested it was closed, it is not. We are on Article 31.
Okay.
Do you have an amendment?
Then I offer an amendment.
What is the amendment, sir?
The amendment is that we change this to read, should the Board of Selectmen be authorized to attempt to negotiate a memo of understanding with the New Hampshire Department of Transportation regarding construction and maintenance of roads and sidewalks at Hampton Beach. Period.
Is there a second to Mr. Rice's amendment? Who's that? Mr. Pierce? Can I have it? Would you speak to your amendment, please?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Right now, as I say, we've got an impasse right here. We don't have anything to deal with. We're getting wrapped around the axle amongst old agreements that may or may not be valid. There are still legal determinations to be made on those. And in the meantime, nothing is getting done. I think that for the moment, we need to set aside what the outcomes of those may be, and instead attempt to sit down with the Department of Transportation and negotiate with them a memo of understanding so that there is a clear understanding that they are responsible for this, and that we may be responsible for that. We certainly don't want our sidewalks to go, and roads down there to go uncared for. I've had a discussion with some DOT officials up in Concord, and they said, well, it's our policy. We don't do any sidewalks anywhere. And I said, yeah, but all the DOT roads there are no sidewalks on Route 101 or Route 125. There just aren't any, so I can understand that is your general policy for 95 to 98% of your roads. And they said, well, yeah, that's true. I said, but down at Hampton Beach, you made the agreement that you would take on the maintenance of these roads as a part of the deal when you acquired those roads so that you could build all the rest of your facilities. That was part of the deal. Now, shouldn't there be an exception? And the individual kind of went, well, yeah, maybe. And so they are not totally closed to it. That's their policy right now. There's certainly room for legislation to be introduced that would change this, that would obligate them to stay with the
agreement that was made, but it would have to be done after some appropriate investigation to make sure of exactly what is still valid on the books up there. That is something that has to be researched to an extensive degree. I mean, the opinions and memories of the people in this room are one thing. What is written in paper in the actual agreements for us to be able to work from is a totally different thing. So I would suggest to you that what we need to do is at least, at this point, give the Board of Selectmen the opportunity, the authorization to sit down and talk. Let's keep discussions open. Let's not be closed-minded and say, oh, we can't do any of that stuff. We may find that we're biting off our nose to spite our face if we do that. So I would strongly suggest and urge people to authorize the selectmen to do this and pass this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Ms. Woolsey, to the Rice amendment, which is up on the screen.
Do you have a question for me, or?
No, please, sir.
I was going to say, have we lost our marbles? The state of New Hampshire owns this. Why should we pay anything on it? Why should we negotiate with the confounded state? And I move the question.
I'm going to take a vote on the Rice amendment to see where we end up on this. So all those in favor of the Rice amendment, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. We have the language? Now, I'm going to read it. All set? Jane, would you please hand the piece of paper up? Thank you. Shall the Board of Selectmen attempt to negotiate a memorandum of understanding with NHDOT regarding construction and maintenance of roads and sidewalks at Hampton Beach? That is the Rice Amendment. All those in favor of the Rice Amendment, raise your voter card. Down cards. All opposed? The Rice Amendment fails. So we're going to have a motion to close discussion on Article 31 as it has been amended by Mr. Griffin. Must give credit where credit is due. All those in favor of closing discussion on Article 31, raise your voter cards. Down cards, all opposed. Article 31 is closed for discussion. We move on to Article 32 by petition of Paula J. and John.
We need to take a minute break to change it to.
Okay. We need to, when I take a motion to restrict reconsideration on Article 31 before we take a break. So moved by Mr. Lally, seconded by Mr. Pierce. All those in favor? Up, down cards. Any opposed? Article 31 is restricted. We